Now, I think the fairest way to do this is sure, let the LPL team play. They play on ping. That's their problem. They are creating a scenario.
Yep.
The Chinese government is creating a scenario where apparently it is impossible for this team to leave the country and play on LAN, and because they want to prioritize the Asian games. There has to be a price for that, and it can't be a price paid for by the other teams.
This is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight. We probably actually should, by the way. Here's one area where we have left it too scoffed in the whole media business, is that Richard years and years ago on By the Numbers, like I'm talking like only a couple of years into it, actually figured out like you should essentially, if you want to be jazzy, come up with like a cool like subtitle, you know, like his for By the Numbers was like something like, I can't remember, it was something like, you know, the Premier Counter-Strike podcast or something. Like he had some like good tagline as to what it was, because obviously the problem we have is this: we have all that status, and we are the only people with the history, the tenure, the pedigree. Like we've even adapted with the times, sort of, but we haven't got any bloody lines still. We're just like, it's just like, here's Thorin and Monty talking shit about TSM or whatever the fans would say it is, you know, it's making shit up or whatever. Like, also, technically already begun, but whatever.
Also, we have to do this now because we never ever do this. Follow the Twitch channel and subscribe, guys.
Oh, that's true.
To the YouTube channel. I know we're terrible about asking you things such as to do it, but yeah, you should do that. You should definitely do that.
Here's a good reason, though. Yeah, here's a good reason, though. First of all, as you might have seen, we are like expanding out the number, for example, of YouTube channels we have. Like we've got a CSGO channel now for Insight and Esports. The current Insight and Esports channel one day will just be the League of Legends one. There may be a future channel that might have other interests that we'll get to when we decide to announce these things. And also, on top of that, just if you notice, we never ask that stuff in the past because at the end of the day, like you're going to find the content anyway. But in the modern day, there may be a world where we aren't on Reddit one day. There may be a world where YouTube algorithm doesn't always update you. So this is in theory, just make sure you're on everything.
Yeah.
Hint to your fucking technocratic masters that you would like this form of distraction from the nightmare of modernity rather than, you know, do something about it and free yourself from the fucking slaves of this alchemically driven demonic artifice that is the internet. But if you're going to stay on the demonically driven artifice that is the internet, watch our show. It's the best on there. Has the minimum amount of demonic shit in there. Try to filter it very particularly, you know.
Exactly. You know, this has the least amount of developer paid propaganda within League of Legends. You can also go follow the CSGO channel, which is brand new. So go over there if you're a CSGO fan. Obviously, you know, the major coming up. We got MSI coming up. Got a lot of shows that are going to be pumping out on both of those channels. It's a great time to subscribe to our channels. So you do that.
Might be more legendary bloody CSGO talent on our channel than the fucking majors broadcast. So just buckle up for that one, I guess, boys. Fucking hell, we'll see.
Yeah, spoiler. The CSGO major watch parties might be pretty stacked on the old channel, considering that the number of people such as Sadikist, Anders, Moses, Semler, Yanko.
And here's the difference, Monty. Here's the difference. I will actually update you, fans. This is why it's good when you can actually get good partners and sponsors that you can work with and can help you have the resources to do what you want to do. Right? In the past years, when I didn't get hired to majors, Monty, my fans, because obviously a fan only thinks from their perspective and doesn't put themselves in your shoes, they would always go like, "Oh well, Thorin, at least no majors club will be banging." And I was like, "You are aware I don't get paid any money for that. Like, I would rather have the $15,000 rather than, you know, do the same work for free in a scuff that, like, but here's the difference. Actually, we can pay people now, so it actually might be really cool. So I even hope one day, wink, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, maybe this could even be a future avenue so that we don't all have to sit around with fucking TOs playing God with our careers, like DDK and fucking Sean Gares found in Valorant, and now people are finding in League of Legends, in LEC. Notice how some of the big names didn't get hired immediately. Now in CSGO, you're seeing legends of the game, who you'll notice, by the way, haven't done anything controversial. They haven't been involved in any of the fucking Twitter threads I get into. They're just people doing the bloody game. But as you're learning, even in theory, the meekest and mildest of the really good talents, they all get the... It's like beatings must continue until fucking morale improves. It's that scenario again, isn't it?
It's okay, Thorin. I'm sure the LEC commissioner, Riot Max or whatever his name is going to make another excellent interview explaining why Shox is going to the CSGO major instead of MSI for Riot. I'm sure that's going to be coming in soon, because he already explained to us that it's totally normal to have negotiations for talent go into the season where they don't appear on your broadcast for multiple weeks, and there's a publicly known contract issue where you can't come to terms. He told me that that's totally normal, even though let me think about the times I've seen that in esports in 20 years. Never. I've actually never seen that. Either people go to the event and they start the league on time, or they aren't there at all. I've, in fact, never seen a single instance of somebody not showing up for multiple weeks and then showing up again. So, don't let them gaslight you either about what is and isn't normal. Speaking of shocks, she's going to be at the major, turns out. Means that just overlaps right with MSI. And you can't be in two places at once. So she has officially chosen the major, which I don't blame her. I think it's a much more interesting tournament than MSI overall. But there you go.
Great choice as well. Like, if people don't know, one thing I think people in League of Legends have made a big mistake with is this. Even though Shox actually has dedicated herself heavily to League of Legends, in fact, I even know, by the way, if people don't know, there's certain other gigs she could have taken along the way that could have get her more money than she makes now. She does it because she also likes League of Legends and esports, and I'm sure working with the same team at LEC and stuff. But what people don't realize is this. Her type of a role, host or interviewer, I think those people, if they work on their skill sets, they should be trying to be multi-game, because right now that's one of the only ways you can maybe escape some of what I was talking about before, when you get caught up in the fucking developer nightmare where you're playing musical chairs and will you be invited this time, won't you? Tell you what, it encourages them to invite you a hell of a lot more if they know that you're a rival championship for another big game not only wants them. But I'll tell you right now, here's a prediction: Shox will be incredibly popular in terms of how she is received at this major, because not only is there nothing about her on camera persona, unless you just hate women, basically, that would be like mega off-putting. Like, she's not even someone who says anything obnoxious. Even her jokes are like, they're so sort of like sweetly phrased. You can't really take them to heart, can you? You don't really get burned by them that bad. Like, it's so mild. Like, it's just fun for the family, and so to me, I think she'll actually be mega well received. And believe it or not, I actually think we need her in CS:GO. If people don't know, she's not from CS:GO, but our problem was this: the only legendary hosts we had was Richard Lewis and Machine. And Machine is a caster, and Richard Lewis didn't want to work at the event. He actually turned it down. So the problem was, we have some really good other people, like Freya one day will probably be what Shox is, but she's only a couple of years into her career. She still has to, this is going to be her first major on the desk. So I actually think, by the way, this is even a way better way to do it. Have Shox as like the super vet who has all the professional skill set, then have the endemic person who wants to learn that skill. By the way, who better to learn that from than bloody Shadow Shox? Look what she's doing and learn how she deals with the issues. You can even on the hand even ask her all questions like, what do you do when they don't throw something to me in my ear, or what when they don't have a package ready? So I think that this is going to be great for everyone in CS:GO. And if you're from League, look, yeah, it sucks a little bit, but like MSI was a fairly scuffed tournament anyway. The premise I don't think even really works, as you all come from bloody different regions. Then you pretend to know everything about like the LPL and tell me like Gala's the best player in the world because idiot Doublelift saw one clip on his bloody core stream. So I actually like the idea that we're going to have people in the other games. And for MSI as well, by the way, spoiler, that gives them a chance there too. Like, I'm actually very interested in that angle, money, because no one actually, the penny never dropped for any people, aside from that guy I told you about on the watch party, who told me that, like, don't get used to Shox too much because she'll be at MSI. And I was like, oh, poor boy.
Yeah, spoiler, we kind of knew this was happening for a long time.
Wait, here's what I'm wondering about, though. If there is no Shox, though, that opens the door wide open for that fucking MSI, mate. But here's my issue. I want to ask you this. Do you think that means they just put Dash straight there? Yep. Do you think Law gets a bomb pop? How do they do it? What do you think they do? Just quick shot come in? How do they manage it, do you think?
I think Dash, usually at international events, it's still mostly Dash hosting the desk at Riot, like for League of Legends. And then they have like Shox doing more interviews or, segment hosting or that kind of stuff. So I imagine they just use Lore for that, frankly. I think they're running it out of the Berlin studio again. So even though the event is in Korea, it's my understanding that they're going to be moving everybody from around the world over to Germany in order to broadcast.
Okay, that's cool. At least
from there.
Okay.
So everybody, as far as I know, everybody should be on site for that. But yeah, I think they'll probably just use Dash if I had to guess, and then Lore because she's already in Germany. So yeah, I think that'll be it. I don't think there's any like big surprises coming out in terms of MSI talents, kind of just who you expect. But I do think we should talk about MSI more broadly because holy shit, Thorin. I mean, there's two issues here. First off is that we have to watch apparently all of the best teams like in the major regions absolutely shit on minor region teams for like several days in a pointless group stage where the top teams in the major regions should just be seeded into the second stage and have the minor regions fight it out for the last two slots, in my opinion. Because watching T1 beat up on Saigon Buffalo, if they can even go, frankly, we don't even know the status of the VCT team, Detonation, Focus Me, and the Latin American team, Team Ace, seems like not fun to watch.
What if I was to increase the latency by 35 milliseconds? Would that win you over? That would make it worse. Because, by the way, that whole topic, I can't believe that really was just a storm in a teacup to fans. They don't think that was a big deal that we're playing on 35 ping.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
What I can't believe is how many people agree with the premise that it's like, this is what I can't get, Monty. I always go to pains whenever I talk about something to do with rules, or like if someone asks you the question, what should be done? You notice I always try to outline what my abstract principle is on it, and then what like the practical application that would be in the real world. So I'll give you an example. There are certain cases where maybe actually I think like in principle you shouldn't do this, but in practicality maybe it's the only way to make it work right. My problem is this: everyone else just skips straight to the pragmatism, and they then just become a negotiating where they end up just finding a way to rationalize what happens is good. So I saw so many people, dude, who use this logic. Well, since LPL is one of the best regions, if not the best, and at this tournament, due to the format, you only tend to have 2 elite teams because you have the LPL and the LCS team. If you don't have the LPL team compete on equal ground, then the tournament is worse. You know what? You're absolutely right. But here's the problem with that. You notice how many subjective assumptions were built into that have nothing to do with the rules. What you actually just did there, by the way, here's the actual abstract rule that we're putting in place here. If we're a sport, you're agreeing that if any region can't attend the event, we'll play online. And if as long as it's under, I'll be fair, I won't say it's anyone, but let's say it's under 50 ping, we'll all do this. So that means, by the way, the principle has to apply. If next event, the events in China and Korea can't attend, we have to do the same thing. I'm sorry. But you know what? It gets worse, boys. We have to do it for PCS. We have to do it for any region. Any region. Now, here's the problem. You almost immediately know they wouldn't do that for any other region except maybe Korea and maybe if it was in NA, they'd let NA do it if they were trapped as well. I don't know. That's about it. That's questionable. I think a lot of it's just the Chinese broadcast, quite frankly. The problem with this is, right, it's just WWE if what you're really saying is, and I get it. Look, I really want the LPL to have a chance to win. Look, I do as well, but not at the fucking... I wouldn't sacrifice the rest of the tournament. Like, the one part I can't rationalise is this, Monty. Even when they're not playing the LPL, they have to play on the 35 MS. That's like some absurd Monty Python sketch, mate. What are we doing at this point in time,
Well, it's worse than that, Thorin, because we have to look at the reasons why like this is even happening.
What we were talking about in the past episodes.
So this is why it's so ridiculous. And we're going to get into the Asian games because now kkOma, the coach of the Korean team, has resigned because it's such a fucking clown fiesta over there, which we will go into. I will give you guys the insider information on like what's going on and like Kespa and all this other bullshit that's happening. But here's the thing, guys. The Asian games has actually just ruined a lot of League of Legends this year, okay? Now, remember that the LCK Finals was earlier than it normally is because they needed this time that we're in right now in order to get the official team together for Korea and play the Asian game qualifiers prior to MSI. Now, the qualifiers are going to happen before MSI. The Asian games themselves happen in September, or maybe not. We'll get into that.
Itself right before Worlds
are supposed to happen in September in Hangzhou in China right before Worlds in September.
By the way, don't go to Twitter and type in Hangzhou China right now. You're not going to like the videos you see, boys. We're supposed to be there in that many months. Fuck. Just go to Twitter. It's going to be wild, I'm telling you right now.
Look, Thorin, there are already rumors from the French Associated Press and that this event may not even happen in September.
No, it could go. Here's why. All they need is they just need Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage, and then they'll break us all into the event in You see the joke I'm doing there? The Rock. Look up the movie The Rock. There you go.
So anyway, so now there are rumors that this might not even happen, which is going to make this even more of a clown fiesta. But to roll back, okay, the Asian Games are being prioritized. It's why the LCK, it's why we couldn't delay the finals to like play matches when players didn't have COVID or, all of these other reasons. Now the Asian Games are important to the Korean players because if they win the gold medal, if they win first place, which they did not last time they played, China won, they will be exempt from military service, which is obviously important to the game because then we get star players with a long, more career longevity. Yes. So there is actual value, but the problem is,
and it's huge for Kespa. Obviously, they want Korea to be number one, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
But the problem is like you have to get number one, and at what cost are you going to get it? Because right now, to me, the cost is too high. And China, here's the other thing: the Chinese government wants them to play in Hangzhou in the Asian Games, which are like the Asian, it's basically like the Asian only Olympics. It's run by the Olympic Committee. So they are prioritizing the Asian Games. Now, the problem with this, guys, and we've mentioned it on the show before, is that this is not in the best interests of the actual leagues that operate the sport. And this is another issue with developers and the Chinese government having too much of a hand within the scene. We mentioned this earlier. When the NHL earlier this year had a COVID outbreak, they had to delay games. Those delayed games prevented NHL players from going to the Olympics because they had to make up games during the Olympics. So the Olympics were secondary to the league that the players are contracted to. Like,
it's the same, by the way, normally in the NHL. Like, for example, when they have that World Championship constantly, right? There have been years, Monty, where some of the teams that knew their player would go all the way to the Stanley Cup final. He just doesn't go. Sometimes they don't represent their country. Like, because in that scenario, it's like you're saying, look, it's cool to represent my country. This guy's paying me like $20 million. Like, I'm going to play for that guy, you know? Like,
but what do you want? It is insane. Like, if this is a sport, then the players have to play for the teams that pay them. They are not getting paid to go to the Asian Games, guys. It is not in the team's best interest. The teams that paid the franchising fees to Riot in order to be in these leagues for them to go to these Asian Games, because that exposure doesn't get them any money. It doesn't get the teams any sponsorship value, right? And if they're going to truncate the entire LPL season, and the new rumor is they're going to play an entire split of like 4 best-of-3s a day over a 4-week period just to make the Asian Games.
Shit! They're going to do the LPL split in 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's the rumor. 4 to 5 weeks. That is the rumor. And so the problem is that the Chinese team, if they were to leave China because of the current spike in COVID, they would have to 2-week quarantine on the way back. But there's so many questions you can ask here. First off, if the Chinese government wants players to go to the Asian Games, why can't they create the same government that forces them to quarantine? Why can't they create a quarantine situation where they can play LPL games remotely from quarantine? That seems entirely doable when the government wants both of these things to occur, right?
Give them some special exemption conditions that, you know, maybe you're allowed to like have someone with you.
Or just give them a PC and a good, decent internet connection in quarantine. Like they can still do the quarantine in a government facility. So there are all these questions about why this can't happen. But what is clearly going on here is that the Asian Games are being prioritized. And it's because the Chinese government and Riot, the developer, want more exposure for the game itself, and they want to have players at this Olympics event, but it comes at the cost of their own leagues. And this is the problem. Like, Riot and developer-run sports cannot decide whether they want to be a real fucking sport, like the NHL, or if they want to be a marketing exercise. And I'm so sick of seeing them be marketing exercises and not actually have the stories and the importance of the literal leagues the players are paid to play in be run properly and be run with competitive integrity. And it goes to MSI too, where obviously it's a business decision from Riot, because if the Chinese team doesn't play, they will lose 80% of their viewership. And then they're going to have to report publicly what that viewership was, or it will just be reported publicly naturally by the sites that track this information. And they're going to have to explain to the sponsors that they sold for MSI and Worlds, because they sell these things in multi-year package deals a lot of the time, why the viewership dropped by an extraordinary amount. And they're not going to do that. Now, I think the fairest way to do this is, sure, let the LPL team play. They play on ping. That's their problem. They are creating a scenario.
Yep.
The Chinese government is creating a scenario where apparently it is impossible for this team to leave the country and play on LAN, and because they want to prioritize the Asian Games. There has to be a price for that, and it can't be a price paid for by the other teams.
Think of this, Monty. This is where people have skipped the step, and it's why it's fucking up their logic. Because they're taking the first part you just said, where it's like they can't attend the event, and then they're just going, right, well, we'll let them play online. So you've already given them a concession. No other team's allowed to play online. Everyone else has to go to the event, by the way.
The Vietnamese team couldn't play Worlds online.
Even if they play on 35 ping and no one else does, just letting them play while they don't have to attend is already giving them a special dispensation. As Monty says, to then just punish everyone else is just giving China even more advantage. They don't get to have an advantage. They can't attend the event. There's no other event in history I'm aware of where one set of people are allowed to remotely fucking... It's like I said on the watch party. It's a fucking LAN. That means local area network. This is a WAN. It's the internet. It's a wide area network from China over to bloody like Korea in this case, someone like, it's fucking mental, mate. And then the other thing, I have a problem with this as well. This is why it isn't just a cute piece of trivia that Tencent has connections to the Chinese Communist Party. I wonder why now, when China is the main country involved, Monty, they might be prioritizing nationalistic interests of their country over the integrity of, checks notes, the children's video game that company operates. Give me a break, guys. Does no one see how that oversight might end up fucking up esports? It's going to do more things in the future. Get ready for it.
And here's the other thing. Because the developer is the one involved, there's another key piece of information here why Riot probably wants to play nice with the Chinese government right now. Because Valorant still hasn't been released in China. It hasn't been approved for release yet. Now,
because you weren't allowed to release new games. Yeah, that was right. Yes.
So they have released a new wave of games just a couple weeks ago. But guess what wasn't in there? It was Valorant. And so there are rumors that there's going to be another release of video games that are approved for China by the Chinese government later this year.
They're smart. They'll have even made that the backchild condition, won't they? You have to do this, and therefore we'll put Valorant in the next batch or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, even if there isn't an agreement in place, because we couldn't possibly know, why would Riot do anything to jeopardize that from occurring? Why would they do that? That is potentially like billions of dollars of revenue. So you
don't have any evidence, but what if Riot had like a plant that was like sitting on like a sofa behind the Tencent people while they had an informal conversation? That would count as evidence in court of law. It's another in-joke if people don't get it.
But yeah,
the deep law.
The deep lore. But yeah, this is a real concern, because if you're right, you need Valorant and potentially other future games you want to release. Yeah. So you have to be on good terms with the Chinese government. So, these are all really big issues that Riot's facing, but this is why we can't have the developers. There needs to be a layer between the developer and the esport to actually, protect competitive integrity and turn this to a sport from a marketing exercise. And what's so egregious about this, Thorin, is like, all of the people for years, at Riot are just like, well, traditional sports this, traditional sports that. But they don't treat their own fucking game like a traditional sport. They treat it like a marketing exercise. Yes. So they're constantly violating competitive integrity in these angles and prioritizing weird shit that has nothing to do with sports. And I guarantee you these same people, if traditional sports were doing the same kind of marketing tricks, would be outraged that it's happening in their favorite sport or to their favorite team. It's absurd. And this with MSI, like, there are solutions to it. And you just have to say the Chinese team plays at a disadvantage in this scenario, because you can't punish everybody for a scenario that not everybody created. Like, if LPL wants to run themselves this way, then let them do it.
And also, think about this. Spin it the other way. So everyone's thinking again about the LPL side, Monty. So they're trying to think how fair it'll be to be on 35 when they're on 0. Think about being the Koreans playing your whole fucking career on 5 ping, and then you go to an international tournament you will be judged on in your career and have to play 7 times the ping. That is stupid as fuck. That is stupid as fuck. There is no good reason anyone has yet come up with as to why they would have to play on 35 ping.
And there is no interesting debate about this, because, again, it's a monopoly. Like, we've had this conversation a million times. The ghost commissioner of the LCK, where is this person? It is this person's job to fight in the interests of their team and to do it in a way that makes sense. Nope, not a peep out of them, right? Because it's all done under the glorious overlord of a global system. And so we can't even have people doing their best to represent the interests of their region. Like, this should be a public debate between people, within these different leagues.
Yeah. Since you mentioned it, I think on the last episode, actually, this also does tie into, you nailed it, mate. Because, spoiler, we're not fucking guessing. We know Riot Games. We know what they will do. They are predictable to a painful degree. Oh, what do you know, Monty? The LCS Finals came along. Did Riot even set in their Google Calendar, it is the 10-year anniversary of LCS? No, of course not. So what they did instead, Monty, was they ran the LCS Finals, and even though they had like a team trying to repeat as champions, would only be something like, the 4th time in history someone's ever done that as an org. Maybe 5th, let me think, Cloud9, TSM, Team Liquid, the fifth time someone had gone back-to-back. That's a pretty historic accomplishment. Didn't have anything about that, of course. EG's there with all rookies. Nothing to do with that, of course. But we got Tyler 1 again, saying people's names on stage. And do we have anything about 10 years? Do we have all the legends coming out? No, it's all about Tyler 1 and we've got a crowd. it's just WWE, mate. But the difference is WWE is really good at making their fucking product in the broadcast. Like, there's a reason why that was legendary. The actual things that they do that are WWE in LCS are just fucking humdrum, mate. They're not even that interesting. That's why it's so sad to me. Because like I've always said, to me, if I could go back in time, I sort of had this vibe anyway, but I know it for sure now. If I could go back in time, you could have all the same players and teams. You just got to make it about the attitude of the players. Like, think about what you could have done with the double lifts of the world back in the day. There was so much.
Look, I mean, even jojopyun's like at least talking shit on Twitter now.
Yeah, true.
And here's the use of Tyler One. Why don't you cut some promos with Tyler One interviewing the players and having them talk mad shit and play those? That would be a great idea. That would actually be incredibly entertaining. Yeah. Excellent use of Tyler One. But they don't do that. You know, it's not Tyler One's fault. Like, he did his job. It's just that the job was boring.
I'll give you the angle. Here's how you do it. You do it like I do on my talk shows. If people don't know, a real premise that I figured out years ago in interviews is if I'm really rude, the other person can be 3/4 as rude and they don't look as bad, but they've actually, in isolation, said something pretty edgy. And I'm the flack that allows them to do it. Right?
You just take the aggro.
You just tell Tyler One, you sort of instigate, but we'll make it really obvious. So, for example, if you say to like jojopyun, what do you think of Bjergsen or whatever? And he's like, well, he is a good player. You're like, he's not better than you now, though, right? Isn't he like an old boomer? He'd be like, well, yeah, I guess he isn't that good. Yeah, and plus, he used to have his that's what you do. You have him instigate like that. But I even think it'd sort of make it so that like people wouldn't be mad at the player for talking shit. Because like you're just in Tyler One's world there, aren't you? You're in his zone of just bantering. So you could even do it really effectively, actually, if you did that approach.
Yeah.
But it was so generic instead.
And we didn't see anything about the 10-year history of the LCS, which is, again, we asked, are they going to do something like LCK did, which showed the entire history of the league and was like a major callback to it? And no, there's nothing. It's disappointing because I think the LCS really falls on its face in terms of telling its own story, and that still isn't an issue that has even been remotely fixed. They didn't even try and address it at all. Maybe in summer. Maybe it'll happen in summer, but just seems like a missed opportunity for sure. And then there's the other issue too, which is that at this event, there was the MSI group draw in which what was very interesting about this was they brought in Lily Pichu, who's like an OG LoL content creator, as was in the scene at the very beginning. Some guy I don't know from offline TV. And we found out, later on, it was interesting because on the LPL Weibo account, they posted a picture of Doublelift and Meteos together for the group draw. These are graphic assets that had been made specifically by Riot. Looks like LPL didn't get the memo that Doublelift wasn't going to be on that group draw. It's very, very interesting. If I had to guess, I would say that it probably had something to do with the comments he made about Upset's wife and Upset, leaving the World Championship, which I think were callous. To put it mildly.
Thing, guys, I'm actually one of the few people ever who can put himself in the position of simultaneously roasting Doublelift for this while acknowledging I understand why it's stupid. Because guess what? You know how you'd think to yourself, come on, Doublelift. Surely you're not going to trash talk something that happened that was very sensitive at an international Riot event right before they're going to hire you for a Riot event. But as someone who trash talked the country of Poland hours before flying there, mistakes can happen. I can tell you, we can put a foot wrong every now and then. But I will say the consequences will absolutely be the same. Doublelift, you can take that roasted.
And so here's the thing, guys, that happened. So Doublelift is sponsored by Grubhub, by the way. This whole tournament, the LCS Finals was sponsored by Grubhub. So I think what happened, this is pure supposition. So I am open to being corrected. I think that what happened was Doublelift was supposed to go there because he was at the finals. He was streaming from the finals, which we'll get to in a second. Okay. But I think he was supposed to go there and like do the MSI group draw for free as part of his Grubhub deal. And then he said the stuff about Upsets. He basically, implied that Upset left Worlds for not a very good reason, which then caused Upset and Upset's wife to have to defend themselves basically publicly when basically, I think that there's kind of water under the bridge at this point in time. It had more or less passed over the event and people were understood that, it shouldn't come out. Like, this is probably a serious issue. Spoiler, guys, no real competitor goes to Worlds and then bounces 3 days before the tournament starts and leaves his team high and dry and leaves the opportunity to play for Worlds unless it's probably pretty serious.
It's also the first Worlds he'd ever been to, dude. Like, people. And by the way, this is the part I can't handle. If you ever go back, Monty, don't ever let them gaslight you. They'll gaslight you. They all will. They'll all tell you that he just sort of left with no explanation. In the fucking statement by Riot, Fnatic, on their Twitter, it says the words, something like urgent family matter. Yes. The idea that anyone goes, but I have to know exactly what, otherwise I might speculate. It's not an urgent matter. You're a piece of shit. Like, by the way, Nemesis, you're a piece of shit. Doublelift, you're a piece of shit. Adam, you're a piece of shit. You don't need to know what the urgent family matter is. All you have to know is it is an urgent family matter. And by the way, based on what I heard, it was. Like, I would, put it this way, I would leave if I heard that scenario happen to me. I would leave 100%. No matter, even if I'd never been to Worlds, even if because at the end of the day, it was a scenario. Here's the key part about the urgent family part. The alternative of playing the video game tournament with not going back would age very poorly in your life. Yes. Let me put it that way.
Yes.
You wouldn't look back and go, oh, glad I did do the tournament.
Yeah.
What if I had, it's the other way around, you idiot.
Yeah. And it was obviously really shitty. And I'm sure
of course.
still feels very bad about leaving his team in that scenario. Like, it sucked for everybody. But the alternative was worse, as far as we know. And we have to leave it to the judgment of people at Fnatic and the coaching staff and the ownership there that this was the right call to make, and upset that this was the right call to make. And he doesn't have to go out and defend himself. So this is all to say. This is all to say, guys. What is strange is that so there are very strict code of conduct reasons or like rules for co-streaming with Riot. We saw Dom get banned for who knows why.
Yeah.
Some comments he made in solo queue, allegedly.
It was a reach. If people don't remember, I'll give you the very brief update. Basically, Dom famously flamed someone by, I think it was something like they just didn't gank or something, or like come roam to his lane. So he just said something like, what were you doing, like painting your nails over there? And he just obviously meant it as like a fucking sarcastic way of being like, you're just wasting your time. And because the person who was playing the game turned out to be a woman, which Dom had no way of knowing, by the way. It's not like it's on your bloody OPGG, is it? Like, it's a woman. They tried to imply that he was saying to paint your nails because he's sexist. Like, it was such a reach, it's insane. And that got him removed from war streaming. If people don't remember, there's a real video where he's in tears because they've taken his fucking livelihood from him just because of that fucking comment. Like, so you can imagine that's how tenuous they've taken other people's posts.
And like, what was the double scenario? We don't know because Riot doesn't announce the reasons behind it. They don't announce the reasons behind this ban.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't tell anybody the evidence. Like, so they just do it, and you're just kind of sitting there being like, I don't even know why this fucking happened. Yeah. So let's just continue. Doublelift is allowed to co-stream the finals this weekend because he has 30,000 viewers on his stream. How is he able to do that after getting removed from the MSI group draw, but he's not removed from co-streaming for creating a hate brigade against somebody, another professional player in Europe's wife? Like, what the hell is this standard that they have going on here? I actually thought Riot would... I thought they would just remove him because they can't show any kind of, negative press surrounding women right now, given their $100 million settlement and the fact that they're up shit creek without a paddle. But like, why is Doublelift like allowed to continue co-streaming with the standard they've already set? And it's the same thing as the China stuff, guys. It's the same thing as the MSI stuff. It's because they want this viewership and they are making business decisions that are incongruous with the rules that they have set forth and with the integrity of the sport. Period.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially because to me, like, look, everyone knows my position. I'm generally just a free speech absolutist. Like, I don't think you should be removed for these things. Listen, if you're willing to own it, like if you just come out and say, I don't want negative PR on that topic, that's a reason to remove someone. But in this case, Riot does what Riot always does. They pretend on the one hand they're some objective moral arbiter, but then on the other hand, they clearly act in an incredibly subjective, petty way that's just around their own interests, which even means, by the way, sometimes they'll go against what they've pretended is wrong previously because it benefits them now. So in this scenario, all they've done there is a super cynical fucking odds way up of like, well, which is better, worse, the PR from Doublelift or having Double, and they've just decided to take Doublelift for the thing now. Like, I would even say there's some cynical fucking PR guy who'll have gone, look, if we just take him off the finals, that'll be enough time for it to cool down. It'll be forgotten about by the time that, like, it'll be one of those bastards who like figures out how many days it takes a story to die or something,
Yeah, and for the record, by the way, I don't think either Dom or Doublelift should be removed.
Neither of them should be removed.
That's my opinion. I don't think it was that bad, but I'm just saying, like, if he's going to if what happened to other people in the past if this is their stance and they're going to be this strict about it, and also they're going to remove him from the MSI group draw for this reason, it seems crazy that they're still going to have him, actually show up.
Of course. Here's the thing.
And be on the co-stream.
Doublelift didn't say anything wrong, as in he didn't say any profanity. He didn't break the terms of service. All he did was he was an asshole. Now, You know what the repercussion of being an asshole is? People go, I don't like what you said, you're an asshole. That's what would happen. Yep. So there'd be some people, because the other thing as well, by the way, is I saw people, the amount of gymnastics trying to defend those Doublelift comments was mental, mate. As I said, in the official original statement, it says urgent family matter. And he was still himself months later going, I find those jokes just hilarious. What, people have an urgent family? And then people, Monty, this is what actually drove me nuts. There was people for real contacting me saying, well, surely Doublelift can say that because he played after his family emergency. That's not how that works, dickhead. I can't just go out, by the way, Monty, and take an insane beating from some guy outside a bar and then go, well, it's all right for someone to beat the shit out of you. Happened to me last week. What the fuck are you talking about? You are aware, by the way, that was never to be spun that way. It should never have been that if Doublelift had not attended that event, he was an idiot. It's the other way around. It's totally fine if he hadn't attended the event. He was heroic, potentially, for attending the event and winning. That's epic. No one else is expected to do that, though. And also, by the way, totally different scenario. Here's the difference. Notice this key distinction I'm going to make here. The person, unfortunately, would have had the horrible outcome in Doublelift's scenario, whether he attended or didn't attend the finals. This was a scenario where Upset had a chance to change things. He had a chance to actually potentially fix the problem in the moment. That's a totally different situation. I think you're making light of it if you even bring up the Doublelift situation. And also, I'd add in there as well. It's I'd go the other way on that one and go, Doublelift, can't you have some compassion, mate? I'd go the other way. Shouldn't you be the guy who gets the idea there could be extenuating circumstances? That's the angle I found a bit heartless. It's also, bro, you even were a pro. What the fuck?
Also, fans, it's not the fucking pain Olympics where you're trying to get a gold medal,
no,
guys.
Exactly.
You fucking idiots. So anyway, this whole scenario, this whole scenario caused kind of this last minute change where we have these major influencers come in. So I make a tweet saying well, the Riot, remember, going back to the Shocks thing, apparently there was some sort of contract dispute. We know that because it was said publicly.
Yes.
Right? Now, Riot casters have no way to negotiate right now because Riot has a monopoly on League of Legends, so they have nowhere else to go. So Riot has them all kind of bent over a barrel at the moment because they've taken all of the broadcasts in-house. They've organized themselves in a way where they can just set the rates for basically every region as well as the international events. And so I said, it's crazy that they're going to pay these influencers, these people with millions of followers on YouTube and Twitter and social media, to come in to promote their event and to promote MSI, and they can't pay the casters. To which Lily Pichu responds to me and says that they're not getting paid.
Dude, what I loved about that is the way people thought that was a dunk on Monty. You are aware these people make thousands streaming from their home on the internet. They just admitted, I don't even know my own business. I'm just doing it for free. Lol. It's that's even worse. That's worse. Holy shit.
People accuse me of flip-flopping because my point was the caster should be paid more and that they should be using money to pay influencers to pay the caster. And then obviously I still think influencers should be paid to do the work, and I think they should be compensated appropriately. The whole point is now nobody's getting compensated appropriately, guys. Good job. You defended the multi-billion-dollar company. Nice work. They basically got two people to come in and do this for free. In 2022, I have been stamping out systematically. Here you go. Here's a history of Riot asking people and getting them to do things for free. 2013 World Championship, they tried to get me to do it for free by telling me it was on my OGN contract when that was full of shit. They lied to me, and they only paid me $3,000 to do every single desk for every single game for the entire World Championship. Not a day, total, guys. So I got paid $15 an hour. Anyway, moving on. We have the other thing. That same World Championship, they lied and they told Doublelift and Crepo that it was part of their player contract. So at the time, they had stipends of $25,000 a year that were paid to the teams. They lied to Doublelift. They lied to Crepo. They got them both to do it for free every single game at the World Championship. Then later on, once they started paying people, they would bring in pro players for a day, an entire day, and not pay them to do analysis work at the studio. I broke that story. Guess what? They started playing. Now, when you see a pro player on the analyst desk for an entire day, guess what? They're getting paid, which is great. But they're still in 2022 using people with massive influence and not paying them. Like, this is so ridiculous. And there is no argument that this is exposure for these people because these people are already huge influencers, right? The fact that Riot can announce them and draw their fans into the game provides more value for Riot than it does for these people. And they should absolutely get paid for this, right? So it's so ridiculous that this is still happening. Like, how can this happen? And you know what else? You can say, well, it's their right to do it for free. But here's the knock-on effect of this. If Riot can get major influencers to do work for free, the casters you like have no leverage in negotiation. They have no leverage because the best thing that could happen is that these people take a lot of money, like I'm sure Tyler1 did, and the casters go and they say, well, you paid Tyler1 like $100,000 to do this event or whatever he got paid. Probably something in that ballpark, by the way, given the loss of streaming time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty reasonable, actually, for somebody of Tyler1's, fame and stature within the community, that to do the original promo, to take a day off and do this event, it would be expensive. And he deserves that money. He deserves that money. But the point is like, if these people are getting paid, then the casters can say like, well, I bring a lot of value to this broadcast as well. And so, like, it's just inexplicable that this is happening, and that people at Riot think that this is okay. They think it's okay to go talk to influencers and say, hey, can you come by and do this for free for us? Can we use your name to promote our company, our multi-billion-dollar company, and not pay them? And it's shocking that this is still happening. And I imagine that it happened because they were in a bind because of the whole Doublelift scenario. Again, I assume that's how things went down. But it seemed like a kind of last-second addition, and there had to be a reason for that. And so they just decided to, somebody at Riot decided to call in a favor. But that's obviously unacceptable.
Dude, the craziest thing about the story you said from like season 3 Worlds where Doublelift and Crepple were doing it for free is it's worse than that. Because if people don't remember, this is where having my memory is a fucking blessing, boys. So the year after that, you might remember that when Doublelift wanted those players like Darshan, Zion Spartan at the time, from Dignitas, he got fined for poaching them, didn't he? You remember that story where he poached Skara and like some of the players as well? And not only Doublelift, but I think Hotshot as well, or someone got fined. I think Skara even got fined because he was like technically in Dignitas at the time and then he came over. Right? That means they told Doublelift, oh, by the way, this works part of your contract anyway. Then the next year fined him like 2K out of a 25K contract for something he did wrong. Like, these guys are scum. That's mental. Like, they actually just don't care about the players making their own money. That's so mad to me. That's so mental. It's why I told people, like, unfortunately, this is why Monty actually sucks trying to fix problems in esports, because they're not problems. People intentionally created these systems to benefit themselves. So all you can do is this, and we've done this for so many years now, it's getting boring, mate, is we get ahead of a problem before it fully has happened. We make such a stink about it on a show or social media or Reddit back in the day that something gets changed, never what should be. It's always like a mild compromise. And then people get to go, huzzah, progress. And they don't realize it wouldn't even have happened if we hadn't wasted our time. Like, you are aware, by the way, guys, if we only wanted to make our money from media, we should just let all this stuff happen. We should wait till after this shit with the Asian Games, and then we should just do the episodes where we criticize it and explain how shit it is and how wrong they are. That's how we gain the maximum. That's the way you should do it. Whereas instead what we're doing is we're trying to sort of push the needle a little bit by getting the information out there. But I actually think in a fucked up sense, it might not even be the best long-term approach, because the second we aren't there, mate, that ground will all just be ceded back to the enemy. I've seen the way it happens. Like, it's happened in my native game of CSGO, Monty. There are people who were the #1 commentators in CSGO for a whole couple of years who were getting paid less than they would have paid me if I'd have gone and done the event as a one-off. And we're talking about the biggest TOs in the world. Now, the reason why that happened, Monty, is because the people who carved out all that space, who did the fucking pillage raids into the enemy territory, who get all the Semler, who made the encampments, they left. They weren't hired anymore, and gradually the ground got ceded back to the TOs. And I can tell you, in Riot's game especially, like, now that they've got Valorant as well, and I noticed they're dangling some talent between the two, they're right back to their old game, mate. They're all back on the fucking hot seat. I don't think, unfortunately, like, long-term progress will come within the system. That's why we're trying to do our shit outside of it now, if people don't know. Because there's only so far you can push it internally,
I mean, there's just no point, because there's no financial future within
There isn't.
casting these
There
games.
isn't.
Like it's just true.
Well,
Like
it's not to be a big guy. You can be a smaller guy maybe and be part of their team. But the key thing, if you haven't noticed about Riot, and they've been consistent with this the whole time, Monty, is no matter what you do, you will never be bigger than Riot in any context. Which is mental, by the way, because if you think of any great sport, it's the opposite. Every single great sport is transcended by the greatest players. Wayne Gretzky, Muhammad Ali, fucking Pele. Then you think of the commentators immediately, Monty. You think of the greatest John Madden, all these people come instantly off the top of the head. The joke in League is, and they'll succeed with this eventually, because there will have been so much turnover, people won't have like a Rushmore of like Monty, Jack, Papa Smith. It'll be like, by the end, it'll be like, oh, who was even doing the events? I guess Captain Flowers, and was Kobe there? Like, people won't even remember. There won't be any through line.
It is very important to have these through lines, because if you are a traditional sports fan, so here in Los Angeles, Vin Scully is a legend, who is the announcer at Dodger Stadium for the LA Dodgers. He did it for like 50 years. And so these people become just a trove of stories and information and a living embodiment of the team and of the sport. And if you want to really make a sport that people care about, these people are very, very important to you. And they're it's the same thing right now that you see with Tasteless and Artosis. Like, StarCraft would die if Tasteless and Artosis left. No one would give a shit anymore. They are single-handedly, or I guess dual-handedly with both of them, propping it up still to this day so that fans can experience this, and they have a legacy that stretches all the way back into Brood War at this point in time. Even the Korean broadcast still has Cloud Templar, a player who's been there from the beginning. Everybody loves Jun Young-jun, caster, the caster, the hype guy that you see all the time, who also stretches back to Brood War. They love Kim Dong-jun, who's one of the old analysts who's been there from the beginning when I was there. These people are still there, and they're compensated well, very well, in fact. And so Riot just doesn't seem to care about this at all, and they view these people as replaceable. And for everybody who's like, well, I would watch the games if the casters weren't there. I've made this point before. If the casters change, you will. This is true. You will. Because Riot has set up a monopoly where there isn't any other option. We literally, in League of Legends, have seen what happens when there are two options. When Spo TV came in Korea, and Doa and Papa Smithy and Achilleos and I were on the OGN stream, and other people, including LS at the time, who is not as big as he is now, were on the other stream, 90% of the viewership watched the OGN stream, even when the games were being played in the Spo TV arena, and we were just in an empty room. Okay, we had like 95% of that viewership. And so when given a choice between two different casting products, because that was, again, the only difference. In fact, one casting product was frequently worse because you weren't in the studio to get all of the cool crowd shots or the studio shots or anything like that. People made the choice to go with OGN. Now, likewise, I was on the other side of that when I cast StarCraft for OGN, when it was GSL versus OGN, and it was me and Doa versus Tasteless and Artosis. 95% of the viewers were on the Tasteless and Artosis stream. Obviously, they're better StarCraft casters than me and Doa. Like, come on. So you can see that we actually do have evidence of people having very strong opinions about commentators and gravitating towards those commentators. But when there is a monopoly and there isn't a competing product, when you don't have multiple broadcasters bidding on these games and therefore deciding, hey, I want to get this top talent because I think the viewership's going to be over here, you create a scenario where casters have no value. But it's a Riot-created scenario. It's not a real scenario. So there you go.
Any more topics? Is that it? Have we done the rant? Got a good hour in.
I mean, no, we haven't finished the rants yet.
Was there another topic we had?
We have to talk about kkOma in the Asian games.
Oh, I forgot all about that. Yeah, true.
I'm sorry, guys. There's just been so much. This has been an unusually high week of bullshit, and none of this bullshit has kind of like reached the 4 horsemen bar yet. But we do have to talk about the Asian games. So what's going on with the Asian games, guys, is now kkOma, of course, legendary former T1 coach, current Dam1 coach, is no longer the coach of the national team for the Asian games. So why, you might be asking, is this happening? So KESPA, which is the semi-governmental body, they are the intermediary between the esports world and the Korean government, was responsible for the selection of the Asian games. It was delegated to them by the government of Korea. Now, nobody likes KESPA. I'm not going to, we could do an entire Four Horsemen episodes about why Kespa is fucking horrible and has been for 20 years. But needless to say, this is not the time and place for that. They are, you can see from this particular instance, their vast incompetence.
We also have zero chance of having any impact on what they do, no matter what we say. So don't worry about
that one. Unfortunately, we cannot stop them.
Yes,
Nobody
exactly.
can. Actually, that's not true. Riot could have stopped them by simply refusing to interact with them in the early days of League of Legends, but unfortunately, because Riot was run by people who didn't understand Korean esports, even though I literally warned them about Kespa, they were like, nah, we'll just work with them. And so they re-empowered them. We could have killed them off with StarCraft, basically, or just kept them over there. But Riot was like, we should interact with these people. I'm like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. And then they did. And now Kespa's here to stay. So unfortunate, but there we go. Anyway, so kkOma, basically, Kespa is responsible for selecting the players that are going to be on the Asian game roster. They can only select 6 players, 5 starters and 1 alternate player, but they are doing trials with 10 players. Now, what they did is Kespa, what it appears to me is happening, is that they are trying to make a push to regionalize League of Legends. So they were going to do some exhibition matches as like trials between the 10 players in Gwangju, which is a different city in Korea, using kind of a new esports arena or a new facility that they kind of wanted to show off there. Now, there's several layers to why this is bullshit. First off, why would you possibly like show your scrims if you want these players to like do well at the Asian games? I know it's going to be on a different patch, but there's really no point to doing this. Secondly, isn't it kind of cruel to make these players play publicly for their spots when, again, the reward is potentially not doing 2 years of mandatory military service? Like, that seems like kind of unprofessional. And why not just choose the roster and not let the fans see things and then fight it out if their favorite player doesn't actually make it, even if their favorite player performed well in these exhibition matches? You just need to make that decision.
Yeah, there's the other thing. You're also opening the door for a player one-off in that scrim, popping off, but you don't think he should be in the final team. You don't pick him, and you look like an idiot, and all his fans go mental in the death threats, as all the usual fun of the Korean circus.
So thirdly, if you are going to pick a coach for this team, you have to invest in them authority in order to select the final roster, because nobody at Kespa has kkOma's game knowledge or relationships with these players, etc. And so what happened is kkOma he basically was just eating shit for all of Kespa's decisions, to the point that he was crying on stream. Because obviously, first off, it's an honor to be selected for the national coaching position, but you actually have to be invested with authority for it to be meaningful. And then on top of that, all of the Korean fans are just getting enraged at him. Oh, he's going to be biased for Damwon, even though
he's the
T1 fans are like flipping out, being like, you got to pick the whole T1 roster for the best, for the best opportunity to win this tournament. If you don't do that, you're biased because you're Damwon. Damwon fans are like, you should pick the Damwon players. It's a complete fucking fiesta. So like, it's a lose-lose situation for kkOma. I think he is smart to get the fuck out of this scenario. But because it doesn't matter what he does, because people are going to get mad no matter what, and he's going to eat him on shit no matter what.
China in the fucking tournament, mate. God forbid that happens.
But even if he wins, Thorin, people will be like, "Well, you should have picked this player. We would have won anyway, and it was more important for this player to get military."
You could even argue, that's the most toxic part of it, Monty, is that you've now made it so that if you win, he gets fucked. Because if you win, here's the obvious example, right? If you win and you picked Faker, then all the Damwon fans go, see, biased till the end, got your boy Faker, his military service off. If you pick Showmaker, they go, secretly got a grudge against Faker and don't want him to. You can't fucking, you can't win. You actually can't win. There isn't one, I know. It's so fucked in it.
Dog, I feel for kkOma, man. Like, this is just a terrible situation. But now you have, again, going back to the whole Asian game things, this has been so mishandled that now you have less of a chance than you did before. Remember, you sacrificed the competitive integrity of the LCK by not rescheduling matches while teams had COVID, which affected the final results of the regular season. You didn't push back your playoffs. You didn't push back your finals so that you could do this thing. And now this thing doesn't have a coach and is on fire. It's embarrassing. And again, if you're going to make these decisions about we're going to sacrifice LCK, why is this such a fiesta? Like,
by the way, here's also where the universe does have a sense of humor, though, Monty. Because right at the moment that the tension is at the highest for the LCK, all this stress, all this drama, what do you know? The two teams that have just made it to the final, the LPL, contain 0 Korean imports. So it's also going to be one of the best years ever. For China could essentially just make like a Chinese super team, and they might also win. Like, that's the worst part, is that they could resolve all these issues and still lose. So it'll all be for nothing. No one will get the bloody military service on fully. Like,
well, and also, what happens, Thorin, if this whole event, because of the COVID situation, now there's no reason to believe, by the way, guys, that the COVID situation is going to get any better in China. Like,
no one really knows it, by the way, what the metrics are and why they're doing stuff. So yeah, there's no logic as to whether it'll end. Yeah.
Obviously, nobody has real information because it's kept secret by the Chinese government. So, even though it's in September, now it's a long way away from now, things could certainly get better during this time. They also might not. And ultimately, they're going to have to make a call as to whether this goes forward, before that particular point in time.
By the way, I will mold if they end up somehow cancelling that, like, fucking the league tournament in this competition. I'll go mental, mate.
So if they cancel these games, then all of this bullshit will have been for absolutely no reason.
Even MSI, everything. Like, yes.
We will have sacrificed so much competitive integrity for absolutely nothing this year.
Like if we sign Bjergsen to play mid lane this year, just get nothing to show for it. Millions wasted.
Here's a hot take of something that might happen. Okay, here you go. Because it's the Asian games and the teams are technically close enough to play online, they might cancel the physical sports, keep the esports, because there's more than there's Hearthstone, there's PUBG Mobile,
right?
I think there's a fighting game. There's multiple esports that are medal events at this Asian games. I can't remember quite off the top of my head. So what happens if they do the same thing that MSI is doing, but they give the Chinese team 0 ping because it was supposed to happen in China, and they just force everyone else to play with ping to the Chinese server?
Here's the thing. If I was someone in Tencent, I would be sat going, what if? That's the shit. By the way, imagine the drama that would involve.
Just saying, that's on the table, guys.
This is also, by the way, again, though, why they don't actually understand marketing and esports, Monty. Because what they do instead is, because it's China, and we all know the way shit really works over there, everyone just awkwardly is talking around this and trying to not like point out like the connections between the dots. If they actually had any fucking balls in League, you'd just Vince McMahon it. This would be part of the storyline. It would be like, wait a minute, what's going on? And you know what? China gets to have the 35 ping as well. Like, they come up, what the fuck? That's biased. That's it. Yeah, I don't care, man. Like, I'd do the whole. I'd have like a fake Dana White type character. Fucking, that'd be sick if you did like that, man. Yeah. Like, even if you just had it. By the way, you could actually make all the fucked up shit Riot does suddenly fun. Like, if instead, Monty, of just not saying Doublelift invited, if instead there was some Dana White character again who goes, "Yo, wait, Doublelift, how dare you say that about Doublelift? Right? You're off the event. Oh my god, like you're fired, Trump style. Like, that'd be amazing, mate."
That's the great irony. That's the great irony of League of Legends esports store, and is that Vince McMahon, the fake ass commissioner of a fake ass sport, is a better commissioner than anybody at Riot.
He is. Yeah.
And the fake sport commissioner is actually better than the real commissioner. That is insane.
Exactly. And he just plays one on TV. Exactly. It's great. Yeah. It's true. Actually is.
Oh my god! Fiesta. So yeah, I mean, this people like probably weren't putting all the like dots together on all of the stuff that happened this week regarding just like not paying people on broadcasts, the whole like MSI ping issue, and now combined with the fact that like the kkOma issue with him not being the coach anymore.
As well. When people always do that thing where they go, "Oh, tiniest violin in the world time now." Spare a thought for people like Bjergsen who are playing for millions of dollars and not very good at the game. Oh, they can't just play Champions Queue all the time, Thorin. They've got to have a life. This is what happens when you're actually a top Asian pro. The amount of shit you eat on a daily fucking basis. People like Bjergsen can't even comprehend it, mate. Like, that's the other thing I hate about when they talk about like how hard it is for people in the West. You don't even know how hard it is for these bloody people. Like, spoiler, like we're saying in this scenario, there is no positive outcome if you kkOma. If you win, you get fucked. If you pick the right play, you get fucked. If you pick the wrong play, you get fucked. No matter what, you get hit. That's just your life.
It's the worst
that's just reality, isn't it? I know, it sucks. Like, who the fuck would want that? It's the ultimate poison chalice. And as you say, you don't even pick the players. Yeah, so the thing is, you get the bloody and you didn't pick them.
Yeah, it basically Kesma's just using you as a meat shield.
You're just a flak. That's all you are, just the flak to attract the heat-seeking missile so it doesn't blow up on Kesma.
Kesma's like the hero, like the villain in the action movie who like has that guy held down in front of him while all the bullets are raining down. And Koma's just like, no, please don't kill me.
Exactly.
While all the fans are just there, like the SWAT team behind all the cars, just like aiming their guns at him.
Monty, just because it's so ridiculous, would always be in those action movies back in the day where they would fall, use another person to land on, and then sort of like just get up off of them as though that wouldn't wreck you as well, just like the impact going through their body. But you just use their body as like a human shield to land, and then you just like get off or whatever. Like that wouldn't work. But that is what they've done to kkOma here for sure. It's mad, isn't it? What a fucking world.
So I mean, this was like low key ultimate fiesta week, which is why we had to talk about all of this shit before we get into the actual games, which were the LPL and the LCS finals, which we are going to do now. I think we've navigated through all of the topics that Dagda definitely shouldn't comment on.
Yes, of course. That goes on. There's another thing we actually did learn back in the day, is we did used to, back in the day, because remember, we ourselves didn't know how dangerous it could be and how people would fucking hold petty grudges against you. Like, we used to just have these convos while the other guy sat there and then just, like, offer him chances to just ruin his own career by jumping in. It's like, just don't talk about these topics, mate. You just talk about the games. That's all you need to talk about. Don't worry about the edgy convert. You just cast the games, mate. That's all. Should we get him on then?
Yeah. We'll do
it. By the way, obviously, before we go to that section though, on Esports Bet, I know you're thinking now, what league are you possibly going to present to me, Thorin, right? I know that the LPL's done. That's why Dagda say, I just saw the LCS. They had something of a final. LEC, you had Dylan Falco come on. Obviously, LCK was SK Telecom going 20-0 in Series 1. There is more league to actually be done, though. Like, if people don't know, what is the best competition in Europe after LEC? Spoiler, it's not the LFL. It's actually EU Masters, isn't it? That's obviously what brought about the revolution of the next sets of talents. Basically, most of the top people now in the LEC that have been top the last few years came through EU Masters and the ERLs. Well, they still have those on Esports Bet. You can go check them all out. If there's any leagues that haven't finished yet, they'll be on there still. And if you follow other games, so we talked about at the beginning of the show, Shocks obviously is going to be doing the CSGO major. They'll have that when it comes up in a month or so. Currently also in CSGO, they'll have the Blast Showdown and the Blast Spring Finals. So, as usual, if you follow any other esports, Valorant, Rainbow Six, FIFA, they have them all, boys. They have them all. And as usual, if you want to get the deposit bonus, don't just play for free from the DJT. If you want to get more money, more bang for your buck, use our link in the description box below for 50% deposit bonus on up to $200. Right, now we'll go to the break, play some music, and bring on Dagda, talk about the LPL and how orangey everything is. All right. I am the host for this section. That's why I am the one speaking first. And I will now introduce our guest on a segment not sponsored by anyone else, just a discussion about the LPL. And of course, Dagda is the guest joining us, as I hinted at with the orangey comment. And by the way, what do you know? RNG are indeed again the fucking best. Even though I have to say at this point in time, Dagda, it doesn't actually make any sense why they've won this particular split. Like, the last one last year was the whole cool, the Zhao Hu storyline and bringing all these rookies. Like, if people don't know, if you look this split, like, I've been telling people, the way people still don't really care about LPL is people seem oblivious to, like, how insane their off-season was. Like, that might be the craziest LPL off-season I've ever seen, dude, because if people don't know, even the, like, legendary, like, signature names of orgs just left and went elsewhere. Actually, the joke is Zhao was one of the only ones who stayed, and he role swapped back to mid. So to me, this was one of the craziest splits I've ever seen, mate. Like, from the off season, which seemed to just totally shake the board up. Like, if people don't know, the Shy, look, you're all on different teams. There's only the rare people stayed on the same squads. People even did mad swaps. Like, one of the weirdest ones was where they did the fucking Zoom for 369 swap. It was like, who's making these fucking deals? So anyway, it was all over the place as usual. Obviously, it's the LPL. So again, we also had that scenario where you have Schrodinger's players, where players like Tian, like one day they're actually like the best player, then the next day you're not even sure why they're allowed to play professionally. Like, where players just all over the place as you. So give me let's just start at the top of this one. How has the split been for you overall, Dagda? How have you enjoyed this LPL split and contrasted with all the many others you've watched?
Yeah, I mean, this one was a lot of fun because it was as like just full of bedlam, right? Like, even when you talk about like Zoom and 369, then Zoom just gets replaced by Wayward, right? So
you end up with all these. He's just gone. Exactly, he's memory hold.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool to see like guys like Wayward popping off.
Sure,
but I definitely think this is like our weakest split. by far. Like, just as teams are trying to get all together. Like, even you talk about, why RNG won. Well, it's because top esports don't know how to play a mid game, right?
Yes.
Like, that's the only reason that RNG really got to kind of take the whole tournament. So I think there's been fun watching kind of the growth of some of the players, watching like teams work through the growing pains that they had as they tried to get used to each other. But I certainly think from like a standpoint of international stuff, I think LPL looks the weakest probably it's ever been.
Yeah, it was hard for me to tell because like I didn't watch all the regular season games, but I watched all of the playoff games, and sometimes it's because these things are online, and like when you have online play, it can degenerate into like scrim play a lot of the time. So I was like, is this real? Like, would they? My question was like, would they play like this on LAN or not? It was that kind of my overwhelming question, because there were just such, I think, big flaws with a lot of the LPL teams in these playoffs that, it's what I said previously, was it just felt like whoever managed to fix their shit the fastest was going to be the team that managed to actually take the trophy. Now, I thought that was going to be V5, but, Rich was really disappointing.
We're going to get into it. It's all good. We're going to get into it. It's all good.
Like, PB God can only play Leona, and Rich decided to feed. Yeah. So who could have seen that one coming? And then later on, like the top esports, as you alluded to earlier, they often have, what's impressive about top is they have really good set plays in the early game. Like, their skirmishing ability is insane. Like, the way that you see Knight roaming into the side lanes at like level 3 and 4. They're picking up kills. They're doing excellent turret dives. They're engaging from like the entire screen away and picking up kills. They're so good at like chaining CC, at making sure that they know exactly how much damage they need in order to kill people. But they also get drawn into literally every objective fight on the face of the planet, whether it's good for them or not. And by the time you reach mid game, it's like, should we fight this? Yes. Do we have all of our cooldowns? No, we don't. So we just lose, I guess. Like, that was that. It's very weird. I mean, I think you did a very good job of casting the finals, but there were just really inexplicable points of competition, especially in that 5th game of the finals, where like they had just used the Ziggs ultimate. You called it like right as they used it, like a minute before the Dragon Soul, and then they use it to chunk Xiaohu out on the Vex, and he just recalls, gets full HP like a minute 15 before the Dragon. They just rolls back in and they just own them because they no longer have critical cooldowns that they need to control the fight. I'm just like, why the fuck would you ever do that? Like, what was the point of doing that in the first place? And so it's a very weird series to watch. And RNG, for those of you who don't know, Wei was just like, will he int the early game or not for most of the playoffs? And like, if they don't, their late game is quite good, and they have good team fighting, and they have good objective control. Gala is obviously very good, but they had a pretty big coin flip weakness in the jungler, depending on which champion he was playing. His Volibear was tragic. And, it's like, can they get to the late game? And if they can, then they're going to do pretty well for the most part. They also had better drafts, I think. But anyway, that's all to say. Like, it was very interesting. It was a very interesting LPL playoffs to watch, because you really got the sense of the strong identities and strengths and weaknesses of these teams, which made it very fun. But also, it was kind of sloppy.
The problem I have is this, Dagda. Normally, because I know so many people don't watch the LPL or only watch the final, normally I want to tell them it's the best region by telling them, like, you don't have to worry who wins, essentially. Like, as long as like the top 4 teams get to that double elim part of the playoffs, like, it's actually the most sturdy playoff format in the world. So whoever wins LPL, yeah, maybe they are the best team in the world. The problem I have with this particular split, though, dude, is this. Like, I feel about RNG like I felt about Jankos in the LEC playoffs. He wasn't, like, doing outrageous pop-offs where it's like he's got to be the best jungler. It's like he just played it like an 8 out of 10 every game, and then if anyone else played like a 4 out of 10, they just lost the game and he just caught the throw every time. I felt like that about RNG, because, mate, these 2 top esports series don't even make sense. Like, the first one, top's supposed to easily win and they lose, and then the second one, they look like they're winning and then they lose again. Like, what the fuck? Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it for me. So, like, give me your thoughts on this. Like, RNG as the representative of the LPL, like, what are the strengths? What are they good at? Like put it this way, am I right in thinking you wouldn't, like, say they're better than T1 right now?
Yeah, no. Like, I think that T1 is the best by far, but I also think people kind of idolize T1 a bit more than they should. I think T1 definitely have their own mistakes. I still think they by far and away beat RNG. I think RNG struggle massively in the early game, and I think a lot of that kind of Monty already alluded to is Wei. Because when you look at like how Wei was as a player, when he first came into the league in 2020 with E-Star, they looked really good because he had like one identity, which was level 2, level 3, level 4. I'm ganking bot. We're going to dive it over and over and over and over. We're going to get this nice lead. And that got them the whole way into playoffs. Like they finished 6th at that stage for a new team that came in. It was kind of insane. But
Yeah,
they
yeah,
got found out in playoffs, right? And then you look at summer 2020, and he just has no breeze what he's supposed to be doing, and he looks pretty terrible. And then he gets picked up by RNG. He's got this super set identity of, I'm going to play around Xiaohu, I'm going to gank top over and over and over and over and over. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to get Ming to help me with that, and he looks great again. Then we come into what is now RNG, and again, he kind of doesn't have that like one definitive thing that he needs to do, and I think he's really struggling as a result. I don't think he really knows how to play off of wave states. I don't think he really knows what to do if he doesn't have Ming essentially chaperoning him around the map. I think that's kind of why RNG are struggling in the early stages, because a large portion of the early game was, hey, Wei and Ming are going to link up together and they're going to go top, or they're going to go play around mid. And now you kind of look at them and they're like, oh, well, Ming actually had like our highest duo proximity out of any of the top 4 teams in LPL Finals. And Ming has been so good at roaming, but now he's just playing around Gala. So Wade doesn't really have that guy to chaperone him or move around the map. And I think he's really struggling because of it. So a lot of the time, Xiaohu now is kind of like having to babysit him through the early stages. So the teams aren't jumping in on top of him. And then it means that they're playing a little bit more heavily around Gala and Ming in the bot side. But it's kind of slowing down the pace of the early game, because they're oftentimes relying on Gala getting those late game fights to kind of take over, which is why they're like mid to late game is still pretty good, right? Like once they get a lead and they get into team fights, they know how to execute. But the early game, they just don't really have that identity coming from Wei anymore. And I think he's struggling because of it.
Yeah, I think sorry, go on, Monty.
I think there are some other issues that could be exploited at MSI too. I think part of Top's defeat in the finals was a pretty inconsistent and like it seemed like Wayward had nerves. And so that allowed, I think, Bin to do quite well in many of these games, especially in the early games where he was playing versus the Aurelia, but he was doing very well into what is typically considered a counter matchup for the Gnar. And Wayward was playing too aggressively, and he was dying in a way that I think that you play that matchup with a different top laner, and you probably get a very different results. And so I think that might be problematic for them in the future, is like they kind of got a free pass in the top lane in some of these games, and not sure that's gonna happen to the same degree at an international level.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, realistically, I think a team that actually knows how to play around the early game will just beat RNG. And I think that's the problem, is that top esports, when they got to the mid game, didn't actually know what they were supposed to do when they got there. Like, I think even if you look at, like, I think it was game 2, where they had the Aurelia and the Galio. And they had the ability to play around the sideline if they wanted to, and they just never went for it. Even you look at, like, whenever they have the Rise, right? You never really see Knight in the sideline. It's all about going to fights and, like, not actually trying to use pressure that they have on sides to gain numbers advantage or anything. So I think it made it very easy for RNG. Like, even if you look at, like, the Corki composition that Xiaohu brought out, like, that was just, hey, we're just going to hands off the wheel. Like, we're just going to play for late game. We don't care about what happens at the early stages. And game 1, game 2, they were able to keep it really slow, and they got to the late game point where they could fight. But if you are against a better team, like, say, T1, for example, who are able to take early advantages and then actually use them in a mid game, I just don't see where RNG are able to come into it. You know?
I think it's if you guys want a good example of this, the finals are less bad, I would say, from top esports. But if you watch the semifinal match, because we got 2 best of 5s between these two teams, like top esports lost 3-1, but they should have won all 4 of the games that were played if you look at it kind of objectively. But there were a lot, and they lost it in very different ways each and every time. Like, it was not playing side lanes properly. Well, Knight is on the Rise in one of the games. It was like Baron flipping for a steal in one of the games. Then it was like, we're gonna dive in their base because we're worried about a late game outscale in the last game, and then we're gonna just int it Elder Dragon after that, right? So there were basically Top found very inventive ways to lose, but it was like a different way to lose every single game. And I don't think that's a reliable strategy for RNG. Like, it's just putting yourself in these scenarios is such an uphill battle. Even I will say it's less of an uphill battle than it used to be because of things like objective bounties and because of the strength of scaling in League of Legends in general right now. Like, I would say it's more viable to play this way, the way RNG plays, but still not ideal. not ideal.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is I just want to see more through their mid jungle, right? Like you end up seeing Xiaohu going for things like the Rise, where you can actually like, point and click CC, set up for Wayon if he's playing the Lee Sin or he's playing the Jarvan
I
or
mean,
like
why would
whatever
you
early
play
game he wants to
Corky
play.
Lee Sin like
Yeah.
into Galio Viego? It's like
Yeah.
you intentionally are taking the Lee Sin very early in the draft, and you just have no 2v2 power. Like you just have to seed everything. It doesn't. The synergy level is not amazing.
No. But even when they have things that you can play around, right? Like if you're looking at what was it? They had the Vex Lee Sin. They've had like the even before this, they played like the Rise Lee Sin as well in
Oh,
like
yeah.
semifinals and stuff, and you'd never actually see them like play towards it. So it was just super strange. But also I think Wei's champion pool is a bit of an issue. Like he doesn't look good in the Volibear. And the only two champions that you kind of look at him like his Viego looks good. His Lee Sin is okay. And then you're kind of scratching your head going, well, what else does he actually have, right? So I think that's why we ended up seeing in both times that these two teams played, like the Lee Sin started to like creep up higher and higher in priority once the Viego was banned. So I think it was just a case of like Wade didn't really feel like he could play anything else.
Also, the thing that I find cool though is like I actually just appreciate seeing fucking Xiaohu win another LPL title, because the sad thing is people went so hard on the narrative. Because if people don't know, yes, before Xiaohu, the early RNG teams, well, it was technically Royal Club back then, they were all just like Uzi 1v9, raise the puppy hat. We all know the memes, but like people pushed that too far with the RNG that had Xiaohu. If people don't know, this motherfucker used to be like an MVP of the league while he was playing with Uzi. And even though, yes, at the time that they had like the best team in the world, certainly they created to Uzi. He was still one of the absolute best players. I think if you actually even look the year before that, season 7 Worlds, you'll see like he was absolutely one of the best players in the world. Like could have won Worlds a couple of times. So I always find it cool when people can like step out of the shadow of the narrative. And I even think he's made a totally unique perspective, because even though he comes from a region, you'd think LPL and LCK should be like, it's like the Chovies of the night. It's like the high mechanics, like the best player. No, the cool thing about him is he has like the perks vibe to him. Like the motherfucker can just lose lane but win the game. He just know. In fact, he's even had the fucking successful role swap and keep winning, which if you don't get it, just shows that you just know the game. That means you don't even have to play your role to know the game and how to close situations, win, do things where like essentially know what matchups work without a lead and stuff. Like this guy's just a fucking winner. So for me, him and Ming, like I just love seeing people like that stack championships. Like probably mad underrated players in history because they come from the LPL, sadly, but some of the best to ever do it. So it's in the same way as Mako got his Worlds. I think it's cool to see these guys keep stacking championships without Uzi, so not all the credit just doesn't go to one player.
Also, I think like if you want to see the potential of these players, go ahead and watch Game 5 of the finals. And sure, we will have a debate about whether Zoe Zig's all magic damage was a great idea in the Game 5 of a series. I would say no. I would say no. But also, credit where it's due. Like, Xiaohu was a fucking wizard just sniping Jackie Love out of the back line with the Vex, and Ming's hooks were extraordinary in that game. And so both of them played out of their minds. And people will point at Jackie Love and be like, why didn't you flash it? I don't know if it was reasonable to expect him to flash when he's like, when you're seeing Vex skill shots threaded between like 5 people and he's getting hit from an entire screen away. Like it was ridiculous what Xiaohu was doing. And this is why we see the priority on Vex in China and in some of in Korea to a lesser degree, but especially in China, is that if you play this champion well, at 2 items, you can just 100-0 people. Like if you could just get back there and fuck people up.
And I think it was really interesting this series as well, because we had like the 2 best Vex players in the league. Like if you look at like every highlight performance that we've had from like any Vex, I think 3 of them are like Xiaohu and 1 of them is nice. It's just been absolutely insane, like what he's able to do. And this isn't the first time, like even from games where they're behind, where he'll just blow up 3 people as Vex and absolutely turn the course of the game. Like it's insane what he's able to do. And I think it's going back to kind of what Thorin was saying. Like not only have we had the role swap from Xiaohu, it also felt like honestly Xiaohu had to basically take on the jungle role to a certain extent in the series that we saw as well. Like the fact that he has to play against Knight, one of the best laners that we have in the LPL, and he's also got to worry about what Wei's doing, then try and get roams off, trying to set everything up. And you'll see him a lot as well, where like say Wei wants to move up the top side to make a gank for Bin. Well, oftentimes Xiaohu will like shove Wave and actually go and like cover bot side as well. So he's trying to like cover everything on the map at the same time. And I think it just speaks volumes to him that like not only is it a case of like, oh yeah, well you got the role swap. It's like this man is so like omnipresent on the map and it's such a good understanding of like what are the potential plays that can turn the game around, but he's there to protect it at all points in time.
So he's also entered the faker tier where you play mid lane and just secretly jungle at the same time and just moonlight in another job at your current job. All right,
this is where we've seen the meta kind of going, and we've talked a lot about T1 playing these kind of long range pick comps or these that contain a lot of resets, and T1 was doing it with the Kai'Sa in the mid lane, right, and trying to get a lot of damage. They were doing it with Vex as well. And Jace, but basically the theory holds true among these top regions right now, which is that you really, really want to have extremely long-range poker engage, and then you're following it up with some kind of reset, whether it's like a Viego or an Aurelia. These kind of champions are extreme. Jinx. These kind of champions are very strong in this meta because they allow you to snowball fights so easily and to capitalize off of the poke that you get. I think even it's true in top esports. If you look at their last game, I mean, you can see the theory of it if the Zoe and Ziggs combination, because they were nearly one-shotting the Vex. And I think if Xiaohu had been slightly less fed, maybe they can hit the bubble into Ziggs bomb combo that they were looking for just to zero somebody out. But they did fall behind, and so that wasn't really an option. So I think there is a little bit of bias when people are going to be looking at that draft. But also, going in even at a deficit made it too easy to build, Force of Nature and then, and Merc Treads, and then how do you kill anybody?
There's a key segue I've got here, because this is a question I now want to ask Dagda about the aforementioned top esports. So, by the way, Dagda, if anyone follows top esports, it's totally fitting they would lose a game 5 of a final. They've already done it in the past as well, just like this, because one of the things I hate about top esports, mate, here's what I love. They have the player Knight, maybe the best player never to win Worlds. He's up in that category. He's if people don't know, genuinely, he is like Sleeper being the best player in the world for 3 straight years. He just, unfortunately, had that one World that was mildly lackluster, but that even ties into what I'm going to talk about. Anyone who's a fan of Knight must hate their coach like I do, because this coach, it's like you would think it was the other team coach purposely fucking up the draft. Dude, bear in mind, he's been the one mainstay in this team, this amazing mid laner. Dude, if you even read the interviews, it's like the players themselves, I don't know if they're just memeing, but it's like they seem to know these drafts are always just fucking scoffed as hell. Haven't you noticed that? He has a really cursed fucking drafting history in his teams, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you're kind of referring to the 2 Galio picks at the start, where I was just like,
many of that are just weird.
Why pick Galio? Yeah, and look,
the amount of times, for example, he'll be in a game where it's like if you give him the carry champ, and then like you say, he'll play some supportive champ, or they'll draft a comp where it'll be no fucking damage or something like that. There's so many weird ones they do, and they've had if people don't know, they've had super skilled lineups for years and years now. They could draft a lot of other things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at this series, they seemed fucking terrified of Galio, and I have no idea why. They were blind picking it on red side, every single rotation. They banned it every game as well. I was like, there are answers to this. You're totally fine to let this
champion the rest of the world, dude. It's not even played elsewhere.
And it just they had Xiao, who had that one good Galio engage with the Hecarim, I think it was game 5 of their last series or game 4 of their last series, where they completely wiped them. They turned it around, and that was their game winning play. And it just seemed like PTSD from that, where they're like, we can't let this through. This is just so busted. And I don't know, Knight, you could see it in game 3 and 4, where you actually had him on a champion where he could do something, and it looked like a completely different game. And
look, I don't disagree with the philosophy of the Galio pick, and here's why. They were getting the Aurelia counter pick into the Gnar as a result of the early picking of the Galio, right? And the concept here is that he's supposed to go and help the side lanes, which he is objectively, him and Rookie are very good at showing up under your tower at level 4 on a Galio and then doing it again once Galio gets ult. It's a great champion to go ahead and snowball those lanes. You have the long range engage, which is a premium right now for catching people out. The problem is that when your Aurelia isn't strong, you're useless, right? Yeah. You don't do shit. So if anything, I think that they came in with a game plan of punishing a Gnar pick. And then when they realized that Wayward was not in a state to be carrying these games, then they switched it up. And all of a sudden Wayward was playing, a tank or something like that instead. And they were having a little bit more higher damage from a Rise pick in the mid lane or what have you, right?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest problem with that for me is when you see the Lee Sin, you pretty much instantly know that you're going to lose the mid jungle, right? Because you're going to go with the Viego. Lee Sin is the priority there, and you're going to get counterpicked because they rotated it first, right? Like even if they'd taken it on like red side third pick, I would have been like, okay, cool. Now you can ban away some picks and make sure it's all right. But you just gave all the time in the world for RNG to figure out how they wanted to draft against it. And you've already got a strong jungler there to pair with it. So I just never really saw an opportunity where Knight was going to be able to roam like playoff towards sides in those early levels. And then you kind of get to a point where, okay, cool, like you can try and play for team fights, right? And I agree with the Aurelia. I think as well with the set, you had some opportunities to do that. But even then when they got to team fights, the coordination on the fights was all over the place. I think Mark had a terrible series. Like him on the set looked atrocious. He was whiffing all over the place when it came to his Leona. So it just felt like they never really got to a position where they could actually either one, use the Galio in the early stages, or had the coordination to try and use it in the later game fights as well. So the whole plan just kind of looked abysmal from the get-go. And I just don't know what they're thinking. I just don't understand why they kind of go, oh yeah, like we're going to blind Galio when we have so many things that are just going to push us in and not give us the opportunity to make any plays.
I also noticed in the LPL, you had the same scenario that ended up playing out in a couple of the other regions. So in the same way as like on paper, the like real best team in the LEC and LCS was supposed to be Fnatic and Team Liquid, and neither ended up making the final. The real best team in the LPL was supposed to be Victory 5. If people don't know, Rookie was the MVP. Nearly all the team was like in the bloody all first team, and like one of them was in like the all second team. Like the team, this was supposed to be the team. Especially, dude, once you get to that double elim portion, it's like that. This should be it. There should be another Rookie championship. Let's go to MSI. Let's get that MSI. And it doesn't happen. So for you, is Rookie the best player in the LPL? What do you think of V5?
Yeah, I think Rookie is. And I was really sad that V5 weren't the ones that progressed. I think all of us were expecting V5 to be the team that represented LPL. And then they just threw every single ban that existed at Rookie, and they were like, oh, as long as we like shut down the mid jungle, there's actually nothing this team could do. And that was really sad to see, because I thought V5 were such a cool team to watch as well. And because it wasn't only just that like Rookie was a beast, right? It was like how they played around mid jungle, like instead of you wouldn't like they had super high champion kills per minute, but for like the first 5 minutes, they wouldn't really do anything. It was all about like getting vision and almost like the tension building until they were going to go and look for picks and find these really cool opportunities and play teams off of like how they reset, and like it was super cool. And even when they got behind, right? I think they had like a 67% win rate when behind at 15 minutes. Like, or sorry, 57.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, 50, sorry,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was insane, because all they would do is like they would understand, hey, we've got like an extra 6 seconds here where we can get a tower and still be back to fight this dragon, and suddenly like, oh well, we got the bounty and we're now getting back into it. They were just really, really good at playing from behind. And you'd get some awesome plays where you had like Karsa making that back door against RNG in like their game 3, where he played like hidden a bush for a minute and a half until Elder Dragon spawns and then just guns at his Hecarim. Like you got these awesome plays, but we just never got to see it because of the amount of attention that was put onto mid lane by top esports. I think it was the right call, right? Like realistically, Rookie was kind of the life and soul of this team, linking up with Karsa, Photic and PP God. Like Photic, I'm going to say new, but like we saw him on top esports in 2020 before he got replaced by Jackie Love. Yeah. But definitely a newer player, kind of still trying to find his way. So he wasn't really able to step up and like be a mainstay carry from the bot side. PP God has always been a bit iffy in the bot lane as well. And I think like Monty already said it earlier as well. For me, Rich was awful. Like we've actually seen Rich have a genuinely good split in the LPL. Like he actually improved massively in the laning phase. Yeah. Like his team fighting was always pretty good, like where he was able to have those moments, because that was kind of similar to HOTS, right? But his laning was abysmal. But at the start, same idea, but very quickly grew over the split and was actually like top 3, top 2 top laners we had in the LPL. And then it just all fell apart in the finals. I don't know what happened to him, because I thought, when this guy is considered like the HOTS or the faker of HOTS, that we'd see him like totally comfortable in the finals. Like he's been in this pressure situation before, he'd be all right, but he completely fell apart.
Yeah, if you guys aren't aware, like Rich was on this MVP Black roster in HOTS that had like this one of the greatest win streaks in esports history, which is like, I don't know, what was it, Thorin, like a 46 match win streak or something like that.
I know they won a lot of the big tournaments, yeah.
Yeah, it was completely ridiculous. So this is certainly a player who has played on massive stages before in extremely high pressure environments, has been dominant. So I agree, it was odd because you definitely don't expect to see that. I mean, I think for me, like PP God was the worst player on this roster in playoffs. And I honestly think I want to get your take on this. I feel like Rookie sacrificed too much to get PP God picks. So for example, there were times where in this series where perhaps like in the third game, like they could have taken LeBlanc in the early rotation. And so what they ended up doing was like first picking Lee Sin on blue side, and then with their second rotation on blue side, picking up, Zaya and Leona. And so a lot of teams that we've seen have been saving support, like red side support counter picks, or saving the support for later in the draft. And it felt like that there was such a premium.
What game we're talking about here, by the way?
Game 3 between Victory 5 and Top Esports.
Oh, the V5 one, yeah, sure, okay.
It seemed like throughout this series, they were constantly picking support before the first round of bans, even when there were picks like LeBlanc available. And for me, it's like PPGod had such a limited champion pool, and they were so obsessed with putting him on Leona or Rakan that it was the sacrifice that was made was getting priority picks that can be picked blind for Rookie. And with all of the bans already targeted at Rookie, it just made it very difficult for him to have an effect in this game. And like, I just don't like it as a general rule when you gimp your star player to prop up your worst player.
When he's just eaten 3 target bans from the other team. 3! 3 of them motherfuckers, and then what? He's going to give up another champion to play. The fuck?
So, like, I know PPGod was not playing great, but at the same time, I think you have to enable.
But he should have been by that logic. Yeah, he was getting given the fucking resources, Monty. He should be playing great.
Yeah.
The problem with that scenario there is, what Monty's essentially saying is this. Instead of saying, right, Rookie, it's going to be hard, but your time to carry, they were like, no, help PPGod have an all right game. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You're going to win the championship doing that.
I'm just curious what your take on like that. If you think that was the correct thought process for V5.
No, it's definitely not. I think like the picks from Rookie the picks that they got for Rookie were really strange. Like the Twisted Fate kind of did nothing. Even the Azir coming out was like strange. It felt like, again, it was more kind of like, hey, we're going to try and prop up late game, and rather than giving him the tools he really needed to succeed. And you can even like looking at the picks that came out for Knight on the opposite side, like getting things like the Syndra and these kind of things. It just felt like he always had more tools to kind of deal with Rookie and keep him in check. So yeah, I mean, I think the that's kind of been a problem with PPGod for a while, though, is like he has been very, very coin flippy, and they really want to play aggressive in the bot lane because that's the only thing that PPGod's able to do. So if you don't end up with Leona or Nautilus, like, and you stick him on a Karma or something, for example, like he's going to run it. Like we've seen it so many times, even on Lulu, where he'll like basically play frontline Lulu in the bot lane. You're like, you're dead in the like he's 0-3 in the first 10 minutes. So it is unfortunate. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from, because even on things like the Renata, he was still mispositioning the lane and that and giving kills across. And I think with the volatility that we saw out of the bot lane, basically with like Jackie Love and Mark across whatever series it was, like Gal and Ming were getting 2v2 kills, Jackie Love and Mark were fighting back and getting their own across series. I think they just really needed stability, and they're hoping, look, maybe Rookie can just carry regardless. Alongside Carson, he can still play through the mid jungle, but they just never got a chance because of how heavily Rookie was targeted.
That's also why the LPL is always just so scuffed, though, dude. It's like you never actually get the real super team. Like when we talk about these super teams that some of these players have played on, you notice in the LPL, we just pretend the support position doesn't exist. As long as you can fill the other 4 roles, we'll pretend it's a super team, boys. Like, this is a fucking region that's had Ming and Mako in it the whole time. But Knight and Rookie just have to play with these guys that support their whole career. Can we not just fucking... The worst one of all is this Dagda. RNG had already role swapped Xiaohu to top lane. Just recruit one of these motherfuckers. You've got the team right there. It's right there in front of you. And they never, because this is
another team for Ryan, who is absolutely dog shit.
Why does Rookie always have to have these supports, mate? It's a big role. It's a massive role in League now. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know. I think our support pool is fairly shocking anyway. Like, I mean, you look at Crisp, Ming, Mako, yep, phenomenal. But then after that, you're kind of looking like, all right, well, who's big?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think like your only other option would have been like begging Billy to give up Crisp, but they were never going to do that, right? Like, even if you look across like FPX,
this punishment must be more severe.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think Hung was pretty good in FPX, but again, he's kind of like coin flippy as well. So like, apart from that, you don't really have anyone who's a major standout performer. So I think that's the biggest issue, is that like support is kind of forgotten because there just aren't really any major big supports apart from like those top three. So you always end up with someone who's going to be stuck with a fairly shoddy support, and then you kind of gimp yourself. You're like, all right, well maybe we can try and control this somehow, but it just falls apart. And I think it was heartbreaking to see. Like genuinely, like I was super excited to see V5 the mainstay. Even the opportunity for like Rookie and Faker to go back together would have been such a sick matchup.
Oh no, exactly.
It just never happened.
Yeah, I think
the biggest joke is in the end, Rookie will just have to bloody roll swap to support himself, and that's how he'll win Worlds again, won't he? It'll be him playing with Jackie Love, and Jackie Love will just be like leading him, like, you go in now. Like, well, I don't know about the strike. No, you go in now. I am the leader of the lane. Yeah, whatever, but another day of paradise. Because that's, by the way, the one part I've always found so whack. Right? You know, whenever we have these discussions, which just because of the nature of Reddit and the internet and the Anglosphere, they're always skewed in League of Legends to, why can't NA be as good as these regions? Dude, when they talk about the LPL, they talk like the region like collaborated and just made all the super teams and you can't beat them. Like Monty said, even when the split itself is like super strong in terms of number of strong teams, every top team either has like a ridiculous glaring hole in the roster or like has like some stylistic obvious blind spot that they could just be crushed by the right opponent. So like the thing I find so whack is like if Westerners really are going to like romanticize that all the LPL teams are gods, you may as well quit playing now. Like these teams all have ways, which by the way, they could tell you about each other. It's obvious how you beat the other teams. The point is though, this is what I love about the LPL. The good players on these teams and the parts about their styles that work like a motherfucker. So it doesn't mean because you think you know how to beat them, you will beat them. Like it's a lot harder to actually execute than you think.
I actually don't think that there's like any hope for like Evil Geniuses to take down RNG. Because the thing about RNG is like you have to look at the way they are exploited, which is an LCS team, no LCS team this year has experienced the long range engages that LPL teams are capable of, guys. And like the knowledge of exactly how many people and how much damage are needed to create a pick, especially in the early game.
Let's see them against one of these Vex comps.
The mechanical execution is also just like, and like the reason why RNG is frequently behind is because they fall prey to these tactics, and these tactics are difficult to execute, right? And they play disrespectfully, but disrespectfully when a team is capable of engaging on you from like a full screen away. And it's like, if you watch LPL, like it doesn't matter if you just saw that Viego in the river, because there's, the support on the Viego's team is flashing onto you, and that Viego is charging his stun and flashing onto you, and like they're just going to mechanically execute it perfectly, and it doesn't matter if you know that they're there or not, you are dead. Like that is it. So it's about, you have to anticipate the positioning before you even see them, because that's the only way you live. Or Rise is like fucking coming under your turret with Realm Warp at like 8 minutes into the game, or there's a Galio that's just randomly wandering around from mid lane taunting you under your own turret, and it's like a 4v2 in the bot lane. And like, these are the things that these teams do in order to set RNG behind. And those plays don't exist in the West. They don't exist.
Yeah, and I think so obviously, like I've done a little bit of LEC this split as well, and like watching the LCS, I think there's a very obvious thing that like is missing from the play, which is like just cross mapping. Like every single time I see a play in LPL, and like say they're going for a top lane dive, I instantly look at the mini map. I'm like, you can literally see the jungler go, oh, for fuck's sake, they're top. Now I got to go bot. Like instantly, just like screws everything, just goes straight for the bot lane play, and they will cross map every single time.
Unless you're top esports, and then you make it play top lane, and then you also make it play a dragon simultaneously and lose half of it. But
yeah, true.
You tried.
Yeah, you tried. But, even when I was watching like LCS Finals, I saw it in LEC as well. Like you will see the play happen top, and the jungler, instead of like just rotating to the bot side or finishing a reset and using the tempo advantage that they have to make a play elsewhere in the map, they will like invest more resources to try and like stop the play that's already in motion. And you'll end up giving all of the advantage that you could have had, like from tempo or from a reset, into, oh, well, now we're invested at TP and the jungler's here. And maybe we went like 2 for 1. So technically we got some stuff back, but the other team still came out on top, but you used all these resources as well. Instead, like when you look at what teams will do in the LPL, It's like the jungler will finish his recall, he'll go immediately bot, play off the bot wave that isn't set up, or if they've invested like mid and jungle into a topside play, the mid laner will instantly start to rotate down. Now you're zoning the bot lane completely off the wave, and they're losing out on turret plates, or you're losing more gold, and it starts to even up the trade a lot more. So I think that's kind of one of the big things that I've seen is just like LEC and LCS teams haven't really got that down. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see when you do get to that international level. Because I've seen T1 play this. I think LCK do it reasonably well. But it's just something I think that's missing from the arsenal of like Western teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think LCK generally has very, very good cross mapping. Where the thing about T1 that I think is so intimidating to a team like RNG and why it's a bad matchup for RNG is because their punishes are so brutal. It's like you can do something on the map and they will get twice as much on the other side of the map, and then they will just continue to like push the knife deeper into you, deeper, and that player is almost always capable of capitalizing on that advantage. Like every player knows how to take a lead and run with it, which is really what's wonderful about watching T1 right now. I do think I've spoken about their flaws previously. Like I think they can get too aggressive at times. I think they overplay their hand occasionally. I think they have a very predictable style of drafting and compositions that they play. The problem is can you actually stop them from doing well? Because nobody could. I mean, they're just so good at playing these comps, and we have to assume that they can play other comps too. They just have never been forced to do it. But it's a theoretical weakness if they're forced out of their comfort zone in terms of the styles of compositions that they play. But I just don't think RNG is going to be the team to do that. And suffering some of these early game losses, I don't think RNG is ever going to get to the point a lot of the time where they can show off what their talents are against T1. Now, against, the rest of the teams of that tournament, I think it'll be quite easy for them.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think even when you look at the way T1 plays, it's like everyone's constantly moving, right? When you look at like, you got Zeus who's going to roam down from top lane, make a play mid with Faker. Then suddenly you've got like Carries out in the roam, like he's going mid, or he's suddenly in the top lane and the make a play. Or like everything feels like a constantly moving machine that you kind of got to like keep pace with. And I think that's the problem for RNG at the moment is that they kind of used to have that. I'll say in like 2021, where they were kind of constantly moving that play up towards Xiaohu. But it feels like at the moment, like Ming has kind of been stagnated down towards the bot side. Xiaohu is trying to be that kind of conductor to hold together the early game, but you don't actually get everyone constantly moving where, I've always got to be aware of, well, maybe jungler shows bot, that doesn't mean the support isn't in mid or the top laner isn't in mid, right? And I think that's what you could see catch out Gen.G in their finals as well. And I think that's what RNG are probably going to fall prey to. And I think that's what, top esports to a certain extent were able to do as well. And I just think when we get to a mid game, T1 actually know how to close out a game, and they're not going to, lose literally 2 games because they coin flip Baron and lost the fights in their series, or they, will know how to play side lanes, or they can set up for team fights better. And I think RNG's early game is just going to be their biggest crutch.
I do feel
the problem is if I'm trying to like look at the positions on T1 and say like what lane could I even have a chance in, right? The problem is they have so many good players on T1. In my opinion, the best chance was if you had some like monster top laner, really maybe like a super veteran jungler. RNG doesn't have that setup. Like their jungler is going to be way worse than fucking Order. And Bin is like, look, he was mega a few years ago. I don't know if he's like, the problem is T1 as a team. I don't think it's going to matter against Zeus. Like it's just this isn't a team where you could take like the Shy or Carcer or someone like these players could maybe do something. I don't think they'd even match up against T1, mate. I think T1's way better than everyone in the region for that. Like there's another reason EG going sucks for Monty. Like, what are they going to fucking do from those positions? Just get murdered is what's going to happen. Their top jungler's going to get murked completely.
It is actually tragic that EG is. I mean, it's not tragic for EG because it's going to give their young players, I think really valuable international experience. And I think that if you look at the growth that we've seen from players like Danny and jojopyun, the growth of Danny, I said this on Twitter, but jojopyun played exactly the same number of games in playoffs that he played in the entire regular split, which is as a rookie, you doubled the number of your professional games. You can see extraordinary development if your coaching staff is good, which EG's is. We saw him play a lot better throughout the playoffs compared to the regular season. So I think as an opportunity for EG to actually test themselves internationally and get that experience, like this is a team that can definitely come back stronger. However, I think their performance at this tournament is likely to be very bad. You know, it's like, okay, well, good job, guys. You got away like dying 2v2 in the bot lane every game and getting these horrible deficits. And then suddenly you're able to come back and you're prioritizing this Jinx. By the way, Jinx will be picked off by some of these great teams that can engage on your back line effectively, right? Or you'll just never even get to play because they play poke comps that you never, ever, ever, ever see in the West. That you will never be able to contest an objective because all your, two of your carries will be at 30% HP by the time you walk on the objective. So it's going to be, I think, very difficult for EG to play this style internationally. And also, as much as jojopyun has improved, he's the worst player on EG, guys. Like, I don't know what to tell you. He was the worst player in the playoffs. Impact was great. Inspired was great. Danny was great. Vulcan was great. Like, these were all players who, granted, were all good, but he is still a big weakness in a team in a region where mid lane was very weak this year, guys. And he has to go up against Faker, Xiaohu, and Caps. Like, you think that's gonna go well for him? It's not.
Transition this then. Let's talk about LCS, because there's the thing, Monty, right? It's going to sound like haterism because essentially we're going to have to set up so much context to explain how this could even work as a premise. But basically, the reason why I agree with you, I actually think jojopyun was probably the worst player on this team, which isn't a problem. They won the championship.
He's a rookie. Dude, like, come on.
I have never, ever in my entire time watching the LCS seen a team win the LCS where mid lane had to do less. This is mental. This is a region, if people don't know, the old simple approach to the LCS was spend as much money as you can on an import mid laner and have him just style on everyone. Abidage, fucking Jizuke, Jensen, Bjergsen. You go back in time, that's what they always did. You just bring in the star mid laner and you let him go off in the game. Dude, like, the reason this is so mad is because even though they 3-0'd all those series, I never felt like he was doing anything. Like, he was getting kills in lane, or he was getting kills in a small skirmish fight where they go 3-2 and kills. And I can't remember him popping off in any games. Like, when was he ever like dominating, Monty? This is supposed to be the most influential position in the game. That's why I say, to me, the fact he didn't have to do much actually suggests to me they did an amazing job with how they conceptualized the team set up and the drafts.
And they got lucky. They got lucky because Danny dying in a lot of these early 2v2s was never punished by these teams. Like, you really think that, if Danny dies in a 2v2 to Faker and Korea and Gumayushi, that Faker's not going to be down there just camping him under a turret with Owner. Like, there was no punish. There was no punish for the mistakes. Like, 100 Thieves played an abysmal series, guys. Like, tragically bad. They should have won all of those games that they played because they had significant leads.
But Dagda forgot he had a fucking ult, put it that way. He just forgot that ult exists.
It's like they didn't want to pursue any leads. And so even when Danny was behind, Danny just for free basically gets back into these games, then that's just not going to happen against good teams. You make those mistakes and the wrath of God comes down on you basically. And also, if we look at jojopyun's strength, yeah, he has been good in lane. He hasn't been exceptional at split pushing. He hasn't been exceptional at team fighting. These are skills he's still working on and they are developing. But at the end of the day, like, you could be good at laning. Are you Caps good at laning? Probably not. So then what's your strength?
I agree. Like, watching the finals, I was kind of looking at like how many missed opportunities essentially were there for, like, don't get me wrong, I thought jojopyun like in lane looked relatively okay, but as you say, like, there was a lot of moments where he could have moved around the map on this rise and just completely didn't look for them or wasn't available to use them. And I think, like, especially when you're waiting to play that 2 games out of the 3, the realm warps weren't really there. Even I think in game 1, it was a team fight where he at first Rift Herald, he realm warps into the middle of everyone and then instantly has to stop watch, nearly dies. And it was like, all right, you're just playing like way too overconfident in this scenario. If you just play a simple front to back, you're totally fine. So I think there's just pretty sizable mistakes that he's making, like, out of lane, that I think are going to be massively punished, even if it's not just by like better laners, but also just the way teams are going to be able to punish that in general. And again,
look,
like,
all you have to say is look at the difference between a player like Knight or Faker or Rookie on Rise And look at what happens when they start to get unleashed on the map. Like they're like between your tier 1 and tier 2 turrets, realm warping in and fucking you up on a turret dive. And they're split pushing and they're all over the place. There's like teleporting into your back line. They're like getting low people out of fights. Like it's crazy. There have been amazing plays that T1 has made with Rise, like just teleporting Korea into the middle of a fight and then like having him CC everybody. I mean, there's so many opportunities of what you can do with this champion, and these veteran players really exploit that in a beautiful way.
In LCS, globals don't exist. You can have fucking Tom Kent tries and TF in a game, and no one ever bloody does the gank. Like what the fuck? No lane ganks ever,
dude. If you watched LCS for the past couple of weeks and you watched them play Vex, you would think Vex is like the worst champion ever. And then you watch the LPL finals and you watch Xiaohu just like completely shitting on people with Vex, and you're like, oh, I see why this is good now, because when you hit that skill shot, your AD carry is dying. Like there's nothing you're going to be able to do. That Vex is going in there at 2 items. It's going to have Ludens and Shadow Flame, or it's going to have Ludens and Voice Staff, and somebody's dying. Like, and it's great. It's a really fun champion to watch in those cases. It's hard, it's not the easiest champion to lane with a lot of the time, but also it doesn't require massive. You don't need a lot of gold to be effective on Vex if you know what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think the whole region's gone. Go on.
I was just gonna say, I think the biggest upside for EG was just how good their team fighting was comparatively to 100 Thieves. I just don't think on an international stage like that's gonna cut it, right? Because that's like your bare minimum to get into the club, right? Like, so you're then going up against teams that not only like have this insane team fighting, they kind of just outmatch you when it comes to his individual skill level as well. As you say, like when you see the way the Vexes are played, when you see what is capable on things like even like things like Isaiah, right? So this is to give context. This wasn't me. My brother was watching the Sneaky Medios one, and we were on a call as we were watching. But he was telling me that like Sneaky was saying that for the first time, this was the first time he saw Isaiah actually look like she could do damage and look like the other regions. And like, I think that says a lot when Zaya is basically pick or ban in a lot of other regions. And this is the first time like teams are looking at LCS going, oh, okay, I can understand now why she looks good, right? So I don't know. It feels like there's kind of a bit of a skill discrepancy when it comes to how much you can push out of a champion, even in team fights as well. So at least it is EG that like are kind of pushing that boat forward in LCS, but it still feels like you're kind of a cup behind the likes of T1 and RNG, even when it comes to what you can do in the early stages, how you can play the map, and then what you're capable of on these champions in team fights.
What's the problem for me is so much of the praise that I have for EG in this LCS run, and it would have been the same, by the way, even if they'd lost the final, is for the coaching staff and how they drafted and their whole philosophy even around the priority of picks. Like, I said this to Monty from as soon as we started watching them against C9. It's like they were the team that had their own draft pool. They had a totally different concept, what they wanted on their side, and then maybe they're trying to block a couple of your picks. But if you looked, it's like they let the other team, they were nearly always, most of the time they were on blue side, they just let the other team take the normal picks on the red side, and they would just beat them over and over again. And it wasn't until even the final it looked like teams started actually trying to adapt to the EG draft. Like finally people were like, maybe we should take one of these Orns away from a team that keeps being
Jinx. It was really the Jinx that was the most egregious.
There was another one. And also
like, what they do.
Give them Zeri every fucking game as well. If you watch any other region, you're like, so your plan is to give them Zeri first pick and then play against it. Like, everyone else just bans it perma. Like, what? So that, to me, like, not only did they have an interesting read, but they were playing against opponents that had a totally different read on the meta as far as I could tell.
I mean, it's just offensive for that C9 gives EG Zeri 3 games in a row. Like, that's illegal. And Danny's just going to take the Zeri or he's going to take the Jinx every game. And the picks are very obvious from EG through the last few rounds of the playoffs. Like, they want to play for late game. They're going to play high engage champions. Like, they want to play Stridebreaker Nocturne with Ornn and get into your back line, right? They want to play Jarvan and heavy engage onto you. So it's not like the picks are a surprise. They're playing a heavy front line. They're playing Tom Kench and Rise. They can peel for this Jinx. But if you can't play side lanes or you can't play pick or poke compositions, which 100 Thieves apparently cannot do because they drafted them, but then they played them very badly. Yeah, of course, when you opt into a 5v5 against Ornn, Jarvan, Rise, Jinx, and Tom Kench, you're going to get your ass handed to you. Like, you just can't opt in. You have to get the early lead and not opt into those fights.
I think as well, EG just have a really good like individually have a really good understanding of what they're supposed to do in those team fights, right? Because like I remember watching the Mordekaiser game, and like you see Impact constantly ulting Huhi, and like you think, oh well, he can get onto an AD carry, he can get onto a carry, that makes more sense. But it was like he kind of understood, look, if this Nautilus isn't able to follow up on the Orn engage, we just win the fight anyway. So basically taking your top laner out of the equation is just as important as taking that support out of the equation. And there's a ton of moments like that where I actually think, to give EG their due, like they really understood what everyone needed to do every fight they went into. And it felt like the communication was really on point. And that was kind of where I look at like 100 Thieves, and it just felt like it was a bit all over the joint.
They didn't know how to play the comps. Like EG basically, and this is why I give such credit to the coaching staff, is when you have newer players, and we talked about this. Peter Dunn confirmed it on this show at the beginning of the year, where I was talking about their lock-in performance, where last year Danny was basically a Tristana tower pushing robot who would just split push by himself while, Jizuke drew all the aggro, and he was basically a low economy like minion effectively. Yes. And it's not that he wasn't good, it's that they reduced the stress on him because they put his role in the team that was something that was easily understandable. Okay, so flash forward to lock-in. Well, here they are. Now Danny all of a sudden is getting more of the resources. You even saw this with Inspired saying, we are now giving Danny, Danny's taking my jungle camps. So Danny has graduated to the next level of play where he is the primary carry of this team now, and they are relying on him to do that. Now, jojopyun, they're using his laning, which is fine, but for the most part, he is a low economy mid laner. You can look at this and see that it's true, and they're not putting a lot of burden on him, and they're literally drafting compositions that are the easiest to execute, right? Like you're front to back team fighting with a lot of tanks and a lot of CC, right? These are training wheel comps in League of Legends, and they are exploitable, but if you opt into late game 5v5s versus them, you will just have a bad time. And if no team is able to beat them, then 100 Thieves should either just have literally done the same thing and just opted into late game 5v5 scaling, which I did not understand why they weren't doing that. You saw that the last game a little bit, but not to the same degree that we saw from Evil Geniuses. So I think in a way, EG had a very easy road because they had a clear identity as a team that suited the players. Like, this is just an alignment of optimizing the players you have with a style that complements them and then running with it. And apparently nobody in NA is capable of doing that except for Evil Geniuses.
But even I found the drafts really interesting in general, because like obviously this is LCS is massively different from LPL, or even kind of what I've seen over in LEC as well. And like even when you're looking at like the ability to try and like play through the mid jungle or like move to sides, it's like, oh well, most of the time that's in favor of EG. Even if they don't fully utilize it, I was like, okay, well, you've got a very simple way to like have access sides, set up for skirmishes, and it felt like a lot of the times 100 Thieves were just trying to push the boat in the early stages, where it's like, oh, we're going to go for this invade, and then you look at the mini map, you're like, you've no priority anywhere, and you're just going to get collapsed on very, very quickly. There's a ton of moments like that where it's like it didn't really make a huge amount of sense for me what 100 Thieves were trying to achieve at points. And even then, seeing like things like the Graves coming through was kind of a bit of a head scratcher for me, where I'm like, you've got lethality Graves into like Mordekaiser, Jarvan, and Leona. I'm like, you're not going to get anything done. Like, you've no threat for the backline. And game one as well, I was like, oh, well, we got this Aatrox pick who's super fed. I'm like, this Aatrox is going to get to do nothing in this game at any point in time. Like, you're trying to get onto the back line. And what was it? It was the Jinx with a Tam Kench. You've got like Ryze CC, Jarvan CC, and Ornn you're trying to get past.
You're never getting back there.
And you're the only tank. It was like, you're never, like, you have to fight front to back, and you have no hope of winning that. It just felt weird to me, the kind of draft parties that we're seeing for 100 Thieves in a lot of these games as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think it was definitely an uphill battle, but it was also just an execution error because they had pretty good leads in a lot of these games. It's just a matter of how do you play these leads out properly and create picks so that you avoid the 5v5 fights that will seal your doom effectively. But I think EG...
Also, what made it so whack to me, I want to ask you this, Monty. Right, here's the problem. If one team got outdrafted and then also had like underperformances, fine, that can happen to one team. It's not just the draft alone, obviously it helps them to... Dude, all the top teams that played against EG had the same exact MO. Not only was the draft like clearly something they weren't prepared with answers for, or if there were answers, they couldn't make them work. Like, either what would happen is either there'd be a scale and comp for EG, but they get ahead in the early game. And you're like, well, now there's no chance. Or even you saw it in the 100 Thieves game, they get the early kill, but then they can't do anything with it. They can't have a snowball it. Because the thing that kept tricking me was this. There are so many principles analytically in League of Legends that didn't apply in these LCS playoffs. Like I said about jojopyun, you didn't even have to be the best player from mid lane. You could just be the worst from mid lane and win. Similarly, right, if you're ever watching LEC, a standard rule of thumb that'll serve you so well if you want to pick who wins in the playoffs is who has the better jungle mid. That will win so many fucking LEC players. I'd even argue it won the last one. But you looked in this series, mate. Again, I was thinking closer and Abadagi, mate. I only need one of them to pop off. We're in the game. Neither. Nothing at all. Nothing at all in this whole series. I mean, Closer, he was the one just getting fucking like, he was at war with his own fucking coach as far as I can tell. What are these picks? Why the fuck is he playing Trundle and then Graves? What's going on? So to me, like, the messaging on the other side of these teams, like these teams don't seem like they had any idea what to do after they get cracked in the first game.
I think the problem with both 100 Thieves and Team Liquid was they both tried to get cute. They didn't. Both of these teams didn't want to play their own game. They wanted to play a counter game. Like we saw this with Bwipo and his picks in the playoffs. With Closer, they picked the Trundle because they wanted to basically dissuade EG from picking Ornn. But unfortunately, there were just so many tanks that it actually didn't matter if Ornn got Trundle ulted, because guess what? There's Jarvan, Ryze, and Tahm Kench there too. So that Jinx is not dying when you kill one of their tanks. Like, I hate to break it to you. Like, you know, there were answers, I think, from Evil Geniuses banning the Lee Sin, also intelligent against Closer. But this is what I'm saying is, like, 100 Thieves came in with a counter game plan against Evil Geniuses, not a comp or a style of comp that they themselves are particularly adept at executing. Whereas EG just had, it's like T1, they just had redundancies for all of the different things that could be banned or picked, so that they have an answer to what you're doing while still playing the kind of game that they want to play.
I also think that 100 Thieves just didn't really know what to do with the leads that they had when they got them. Because, like, you look at game one, right? Like, they actually get a really nice turnaround gank in mid. Like 3 minutes into the game, you're like, oh, okay, or sorry, 5 minutes into the game, they're like, oh, okay, we actually got a nice play. We've got a nice lead for ourselves. Instantly, they throw it away at the next dragon fight. Like, completely scuffed the play entirely. And
I mean, that TF ult was tragic at that dragon fight. Like, I mean, he doesn't use it. Like, I think they thought that they could get the dragon. I think that was a mistake where the dragon was very low. I think they thought they could get in and get out before they had to use the TF ult. And then when EG got there and the dragon was like at 500 HP, they finished the dragon, and then TF's like, oh shit, they're already there. And so I think that was a communication issue where they were trying to save the TF ult and get priority somewhere else on the map, but they made a mistake. But that doesn't excuse all of the other things that happened later, such as the Herald fight, which was also mega scuffed. You know, their inability to like use the TF to actually be proactive in either of the side lanes that were doing well, or to shut down the Jinx. Because like, if you shut down, here's the thing, if you shut down the Jinx in that composition, there is no more damage. So you're doing well. You just have to realize that Jinx is the priority, and you are going to send everybody into the bottom of the map and dive her repeatedly. So she's useless.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And I think that for game 2 as well was kind of a similar story for myself, where I was like, oh yeah, if you just kind of pay attention to your Xayah, like, Aphelios is your damage from 100 Thieves here. Like, why you were not playing down to this bot side, I don't understand. But even then, like, you're coming in and they play up towards top, they get a kill onto Mordekaiser, and I'm like, okay, cool, you go and do Rift Herald now. Like, you've 3 members here, you've pushed mid, like, you're totally fine to just turn for Rift Herald, they can't get here. And still, they all just reset, and then they have a Rift Herald fight, which they lose, because EG are just better at setting up for their fights. And then you're like, well, you can still work through these advantages that you have. You, like, even if you are worse at team fighting, that doesn't mean you have to, like, lose the game. You can actually still find ways to get these early advantages that you can work around, so you just get a big enough gold lead that it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, top Esports, like game 3, where they just literally got this huge advantage, so they could just smack you across the face every time they walked up to you, like with Jackie Loves Draven. That's how you can technically win these games. So this is where I was kind of like, you can have, if you're going to even like not play around your important part of the map, you can still get other advantages that can then lend itself to your win condition. But it just felt like 100 Thieves never really understood what their win condition was or how much they could get off the map as well.
Yeah, it was very uncharacteristic, especially because I think they had done better against Team Liquid. And you know, a part of this narrative, unfortunately for Evil Geniuses, as much as they have, you know, gotten better, is going to be like the kind of general disappointment of these top level teams within LCS. I put out a poll on Twitter, and like 10K people or something like responded to it, where I said, which is the more disappointing super team, Vitality or Team Liquid? And 65% of people voted for Vitality. But I don't think that's true. I think it's Team Liquid, because the expectation of Vitality, the only expectation for Team Liquid was with this roster was that they were going to win LCS, and that they should, this is on paper, these player names, the single best roster in LCS history. If you just look at the names,
people were implying.
Yeah, it could have been in the West too. Like, now, obviously, G2 is difficult to overcome in that regard, but these names are. This should be an internationally competitive team.
Sure.
So third place is disappointing. Like, much less, like, not winning is disappointing enough, but they couldn't even make it to the final. And they got 3-0'd, guys. And yeah, the first two games were close. They could have gone Team Liquid's way. This is true.
Yeah, but they almost lost to EG before as well, Monty. They almost lost twice to them.
Yeah. So like Team Liquid is enormously disappointing, whereas Vitality, yes, Vitality was also very disappointing, guys. That's why we were saying, who is the bigger disappointment of the super teams? But also, LEC is a more competitive region with better teams in it.
Why are people doing that, by the way? You notice whenever they talk about Vitality, they don't overtly say it because it would be factually wrong, but their premise they set up is like, they were supposed to be a super team and they just leave it at that. They don't mention like there was an even better super team in the same region that also didn't win in Fnatic, by the way. That's who everyone had number one, even before the split, even during the split, even before the playoffs. Vitality, true, was supposed to be like a number 2 or number 3, but like they weren't even supposed to be the clear-cut winner of their region. Like, that's why I do think people have gone. The problem is this, Monty. People want so badly for Perks and Alfari to take the L because they were in LCS and everyone said they were feeding, that they just let that like dissuade them from the fact that like clearly TL failed harder. TL's also playing against a bunch of fucking nobodies. If you're losing, like, look who you actually play against if you're playing fucking Europe, mate. There's some really good teams there.
And TL has the most expensive roster in the entire history of the West.
Monty, let me ask you this question, because I saw this as well. I even saw my boy Amazing, who I obviously love when he's on these shows. He did that thing where they come out and they go, but of course, I just respect so much that Bjergsen's still trying that. No, he gets paid a king's ransom to be this bad. He gets paid incredible amounts of, like, put it this way, if I had to guess, he probably makes like 7 times what Vethio makes, if I had to guess, even though Vethio is 7 times the player Bjergsen is. Like, this isn't Bjergsen, by the way, doing a Tim Donkin and like taking less money to be a good guy. He's just coming and getting absolutely paid like a motherfucker and then just turning out like average performances. And by the way, you know, all the fans that were like, hey, at least they'll get Bjergsen at MSI. You have been spared. You have been spared. It would have been so fucking bad for you if Bjergsen went to this tournament. I can't even believe it, because if anyone saw Bjergsen's Ari and Rise, he was never going to do damage against Xiaohu, Faker, Caps. He would have been bodied, for real. It's actually better for you guys he stayed back, I'm telling you. But yeah, the point I was going to make, Monty, was the other names are all supposed to definitely be the best because they're all like in their primes now. But even bringing Bjergsen back wasn't some like, you know, shrewd like GM move. He was paying this guy top dollar. He's being paid as if he is Caps right now.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why the super team's so underwhelming. Come on.
There is no shot that any player in the West is getting paid more than Bjergsen is right now. No shot. And so, especially when you're coming off of Jensen, because you have to remember the context of this move too. Jensen actually performed quite well at Worlds last year for Liquid.
Carry games against people like Gen G, for fuck's sake. Like, remember, he was in another group that was supposed to be impossible, and he was straight up carrying games against the best teams in the world. Are you kidding?
So Jensen was the best player of that roster, who got cut in favor of Bjergsen to a player who probably is receiving twice the amount of money that Jensen was getting paid last year. So the swap, like, you know, I guess we'll see if it can propel Team Liquid to Worlds or not. But again, to go back to Vitality too, the problem with thinking about Vitality's position is you have to consider not only the level of the league, but who overperformed and who underperformed. Like, Rogue massively overperformed what people's expectations were because they lost the MVP player and the all-star AD carry that they had. And so this is a team that wasn't expected to do as well and then came back and did very well, right? G2 was not expected to do as well as they did. And with, you know, Flackett and Targamas, like, let's be real, they came back and did very well. Meanwhile, on the other side, and this isn't some fucking NA bias, dude, it's just that where did we expect teams to be at the start of the season versus where they were? And objectively, Cloud9 imploded. Summit just inted playoffs. They lost their coach that they had built the team around. So those expectations weren't met, even if I think that most people reasonably expected C9 to be like 3rd, 4th place, right? People were pleasantly surprised by EG and Lock-In, so it looked like they may be able to do some damage. But objectively, 100 Thieves, the defending champion, and Team Liquid underperformed relative. I mean, 100 Thieves spent a lot of the season underperforming, came back at the end, and then flopped in the finals. And Team Liquid just never really got their shit together at any point in time. So I think if you look at expectations, it's also Vitality was in a region where more teams were overperforming expectations, and EG was in a region where more teams were underperforming expectations.
But what about this? Come on.
I was just going to say, part of this is why I'm actually really excited to see EG at international, because actually having like new players like jojopyun and Danny, like, don't get me wrong, they're going to get their asses handed to them, but I actually think I might just put a firework up there as well, where it's like, oh, well, you know, when we're in North America, this isn't the top. This isn't what we're going to be going up against. I think when you got younger players like that, who honestly, I think kind of taking a beating like that can actually give you a lot of motivation to be like, oh, I actually want to go to these and like perform at a much higher level. Yeah. Because I think what ends up happening is that you kind of end up with a lot of these guys that are at the top that are just kind of happy to sit there, to take the salary and go, well, I'm the best of my region, and that's all that I'm ever going to achieve because I'm happy with that. And I actually think like seeing younger talent come up, that is like, well, actual talent from the region as well, I think is really cool to get that opportunity to actually go, oh, this is how I'm going to improve. This is how you actually get I mean, the next best from that region.
And just think about this too. When this pandemic started, jojopyun was like fucking watching ninja streams as a 14 or 15-year-old and flossing and not being able to go to do things like boot camp in Korea. Like, he hasn't done this in League of Legends, right? And so these are just even going to Korea and being in that practice environment is something that he has never done, that obviously he is going to hugely benefit from, in addition to the world-class scrims that EG is going to get. So while I am pretty pessimistic about EG's chances at MSI, I do think that the potential for growth for players like jojopyun and Danny as a result of going to these places that they've never been before, that they've never had the opportunity to go to before, is phenomenal for their potential growth. Like, it has been stifled as a result of the lack of ability to travel internationally or to take advantages of the time that they could have been, you know, doing stuff in academy or what have you.
Here's my problem. Cue a rant that is semi-prepared. That's just something I've been thinking about. It goes like this. That's all well and good if this was Worlds and they just got the third seed. Great, with this plucky little bit like when Koch Gaming went, a couple of like up-and-coming players, let's see how they do. Like, the problem is this, boys, they're supposed to represent NA and actually have a chance to do something at the tournament. This isn't just an extended vanity boot camp where jojopyun gets to meet Faker and find out what happens and get a fixture. He's supposed to play Faker and try and beat him. So my problem is this, right? There's one thing I want to address, because I also am going to police banter now in the esports scene, right? As banter, Peter Dunn actually had a pretty funny joke on Twitter, which is, because obviously everyone spent the whole split telling him, you should have just signed Jensen. Why not Jensen and Doublelift? Obviously, since he 3-0'd everyone and the finals, he did what was a good banter line. He said, with Jensen, we would have 4-0'd, because obviously the joke he's making is, we already 3-0'd, that's the hardest you can win. Like, what would Jensen have done? The problem with that is this. As banter, it's a great line. It's got a grain of truth. It's well executed. It's funny. It claps back as you. The problem is this. It is a nonsense statement, though. Like, first of all, Peter Dunn, I think you'd have won actually even harder in the LCS with Jensen. He's a really good player. And then secondly, as I just mentioned, he's already minted at the international level. Like, think about how many mid laners from NA have ever been good internationally. There was like the odd Bjergsen game, that's the end of the list. It's Jensen, the odd Bjergsen game, and that's the end of the list. And you notice I didn't say the odd Jensen game, I said it's Jensen, the odd Bjergsen game, that's the end of the list. There's no port, there's no, they're all just victims. They are bodies in a body count at the back of the boss fight. There's no one else doing anything ever from that region, right? So the idea that like jojopyun going this time, right, by Worlds, is he going to be what Jensen was last time? Probably not. Is he going to be next year? No one knows, because only one guy ever did it out of the region. So all I'm going to say is that was a bridge too far for me, Peter Dunn. Like, the problem is, like, your team probably would be better with Jensen. Now you can go, but what about the future? Yeah, I tell you what, how about when the future happens, come back and tell me, and then cut back at that one, go, well, Thorin, you said, tell you what, if you're right, like if it's like Humanoid, by the way, if you actually are right and he becomes better than Perks, like Humanoid might be better than Perks, then fair play, I'll give it up to you. But that hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened. And then there's one other argument that is a segue from this, and this is good, Dagda, because this is an abstract topic. We can pull it back from the specifics, which is, this has obviously reignited, as you'll have seen on social media, the whole topic of, should NA import, is there NA talent? It's opened that whole smorgasbord. Now, I will say, everyone else is doing the opposite. They're making it like they're collapsing the narratives, and the one narrative goes like this. EG showed that if you just put mid laners and NA players in AD carry, they can win as well. That's really what people were making the fucking narrative, right? I won't make this one too long because I want to get you guys in on this, but the short version goes like this. This is a team that did an amazing job drafting. That Monty just explained how they were able to make their mid laner not have to do much in terms of decision making. How previously they worked with their AD carry that way. How all the drafts now made the AD carry basically like play the game like Time Crisis style on bloody rails, just taking his fights when he's like maneuvered to them like the game's doing there. And then after all that, what enabled that structure to work? You signed the fucking MVP of the European LEC as your jungler, import jungler, and then your top laner. Now you get to fuck around and pretend he is from NA. He is a Korean world champion who is probably the most consistent player in his role
reliable
in the history of the game. And then you're going to step back and go, it's all about giving young NA talent. Fuck you. Fuck you, dude. Because that's like me signing like fucking Messi and then fucking Iniesta and then the best goalkeeper ever and having a couple of NA players in defence and going, the reason we're the best, of course, is the defenders from NA. Like, no, it isn't, is it? That's not the way your team should be. That's not really a fair judgment, is it? So the whole point is, I'm going to come back out here. We can have there's obviously a really interesting wide debate. We can have a discussion about all these angles, but what do you guys think of that? Because I thought that was like a bit reductive. Like, I know it was an easy win for people who believe in NA talent, but
I do like the like rail, like Danny being like basically a rails shooter player, which is so
for you. All right.
The difference is somehow Danny actually falls off the rails at the start of each level, and then
put him
and then Impact just like slaps him back on the rails. Like, okay, Danny, like, you're good now.
Goes too fast on the corner, it comes off. You have to put it on. Exactly. Yes.
Yes. Like, Danny is the player who somehow falls off the rails in the rails shooter right at the start. But yeah, like I think this argument is very legit because like, it's just they surrounded him with good players, and like there's nothing wrong with this, guys. By the way, like,
it's a great way to do it if you do want NA talent, of course.
They built a great roster and they around a concept, and they have iteratively, as we talked about with Danny and now JoJo, improved the roster over time. Obviously improved the players. They have ratcheted up, carry stress on players very deliberately and very slowly. I assume we're going to see, them ratchet it up on jojopyun over this year. And it's a good system that they have going, and it's good coaching, it's good drafting, it's good focus on goals. All of these things are great about the EG org. But just because they are good at these things doesn't mean that NA Jesus has come to save us yet. Now, it could happen. It could happen, guys. So if people take this out of context later, if jojopyun...
Both good candidates for in the Euro. Oh, here's the thing. If I had to guess from seeing esports, I would say next year's the year where they could be like on their own real top players.
For sure.
Right now, though, by the way, here's the other thing that's key to point out. Nothing EG's doing is wrong. It's the opposite. They actually, here's the joke. If you actually take into consideration all the context I said, it's actually a really interesting blueprint around how you could make NA talents work. Because by the way, that's essentially what I've seen happen in Dota. In Dota, most of the captain players are all like the hard 5 positions who get no resources. And then they just pilot some like wunderkind who plays mid or fucking carry. And then they just essentially pilot that guy's brain in the game and just use his mechanics. So that might even be how you could make NA talent work. Find the best like AD carry you can, and then set him up so it's not as hard anymore. He's not just playing like any other AD carry. You play the comps that work for him, and then ease him into competitive, as it were. What do you think, Dagda, on this whole topic? Because obviously it must be weird for you. You're coming from a region that's overflowing with talent. That's like essentially, like we said with the Wayward example, you can sign the player in a blockbuster who's considered the best top laner for the last 3 years, and then he can play shit, and you can go, you know what, never play him again. Just bring whoever the fuck's out there. Oh, is he really good as well? Yeah, well, fuck it, no problem. Like, obviously LCS doesn't have that scenario. It's a bit of a different landscape. So what were your thoughts on this whole topic and seeing EG win in this regard?
Like, I think it's kind of hard to look. I'm not going to be on the side of like, hey, this was all about the wonder kids that came up, because I do agree. I mean, when you literally see like Impact, Vulcan, and Inspired like corralling people into the Baron pit and like prodding Danny to go kill them, like there's not, you can't really say like, oh yeah, well Danny like absolutely popped up. But I must say Danny was very, very good. Like I know the pentakill that he got, like even though it was like very much set up for him, I still think he played that fight incredibly well, and I still think he mechanically played that well. And actually, that was the reason that he managed to pick it up, right? So I do think that these guys have talent and that it's worth developing. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that like, even if it isn't necessarily true that, hey, it was the Wonder Kids. I still think it's worth kind of like leaning into that narrative a little bit as well, so people actually get a chance. Because at the moment, you don't actually see most people really getting a chance coming up from the Academy League, right? And when you get guys like Danny and jojopyun now who are going to that international stage, it's really cool to see that they are given their chance. And again, kind of shout out to Peter Dunn, because I think he's phenomenal at finding these players, because he did it on Mad Lions and you see him doing it again on EG. Same with Kelsey as well, who was involved in this. Like they are actually willing to find these people and give them the chance, and you're seeing the results, right? So even if you do have, you know, Impact, Inspired, and Vulcan kind of being the puppeteers behind the scene, you can still kind of see the capabilities there. And oftentimes that's what a lot of these newer players need, right? Like you look at, like, we had Bo over in the LPL as well, who was an absolute monster when he came in onto FPX, with Chris basically doing the exact same thing, where he's like, we always joked about him being the dog of the leash, just letting him do his thing. Like, you can see that this actually works. Like, this is something that you can just do. And it's a way you can kind of streamline these guys into much better positions than they ever would have been, because they're literally sitting beside world champions that can actually go, hey, look, this is probably what you should do in this situation, or like kind of just streamline the effectiveness of the year that they're going to have. And when they get to that international stage as well, having someone that goes, look, hey, here's how you take your beating on your chin and what you can learn from it, right? So I think actually giving these guys a chance is super important. And if the narrative is a little bit skewed, I still think it kind of is worthwhile having that narrative, just so more people get a chance.
Also, Monty did have a good touche, which actually Peter Dunn even said touche as a return. By the way, in esports, that's quite cool. If you just acknowledge when someone gets you, you don't have to keep up this shitty tit and for tap banter. But anyway, obviously, when Peter Dunn himself, I think it was after the TL series, made some sort of comment about like NA talents or whatever, Monty was like, yeah, but they imported you. It's like, we have got you on that one. We haven't got NA coaches, have they? Because that's the thing. It's also a joke aside, though, the difference between EG and the other teams. Here's the joke. The LCS used to look over, and here's the analogy I'll give you, Dagda. They would have looked at a team like Mad Lions and go, what, they came from nowhere? Buy their best players. Instead, the question you should have asked is what EG did, which is, who built that team? And just buy him. Why not just buy him and have him make your team? That's the part I find crazy. Because, by the way, spoiler, in CSGO, this is exactly what Cloud9 is doing right now. If you're a Cloud9 League of Legends fan, they haven't just signed like a really good Russian CSGO team. They've got the guy who built the fucking Moscow 5 and Gambit CSGO teams, the League of Legends one from back in the day and the CSGO one now. So really, they're getting the GM as well. So that means even if this team doesn't work out, that can be multiple teams. That could be 10 years of Cloud9 for all you know. So like that's the area I do think is underrated. Because I always said, by the way, I know obviously this ties into the whole LSS angle. That's what I don't get, is I would have had these guys from years ago, at least on staffs. I wouldn't have had them as primary head coaches, but like people like LS, Peter Dunn, way back in the day, veteran, etc. These people, like, they had their own specialist skill sets. You know, you could have had them on your team and benefited from it, but no one really did. And then you see now, two different orgs are giving Peter Dunn the keys, and look at the results. So I think some of these people need to be empowered, like we've said about coaches for a million years. That's why you need the GM role as well, because when you have the GM and the coach, you have another buffer between the idiot management and the fucking coach, don't you? He's not just going direct.
I will say, for fans that are like huffing the hopium right now, please do remember that while I love Peter Dunn, the first international result that Mad Lions had with a bunch of new players maybe wasn't so great. So maybe I would just say, like, that's probably what we should expect from this iteration of EG at MSI. Obviously won't look so bad because there's only one team from every region going, so they can only get bodied so hard. But you know, these things take time, is my point. And I don't think that's an indictment of Peter Dunn. I just think he is a deliberate person who builds systems over a number of years. And as long as he has the buy-in from the org, you can see that the fruits of that labor over time can be, in fact, worth it. But yeah, I do find it funny that the whole emphasis has been on NA talent, because it's somehow just lost that Cloud9 has been doing this for a number of years too. Part of the NA talent is Vulcan on the EG roster, who was, you know, basically, I mean, he was a professional player before he was on Cloud9, but he reached like new peaks on Cloud9. And historically, Cloud9 has had players like Blabber. Remember the NA two-time MVP of LCS? Are we just going to pretend that a two-time MVP isn't, in fact, a native-born North American talent? Like, the problem here is really the messaging. Like, Cloud9 has not gone out of their way over the years to be like, we are the source of North American talent, even though objectively that is true with the number of players that they have put into championship like situations on their team or on other people's teams. And EG has just been pumping they've been pumping the PR really hard on this one, which is why it seems like it's just happening now. But if you actually use your brain and think about it, it's not super unique. So that's my take.
Yeah. I just like personally, I just think even if the narrative isn't fully correct, sometimes it's kind of worth leaning into because the guys at the top who kind of make these decisions aren't also the guys that are on the ground. So if the narrative is, hey, there is cool NA talent, maybe the idiots who don't really know what they're doing might actually take it on board. And
but again, I think that's disingenuous. If you look at Papa Smithy's actions on 100 Thieves over the past couple of years, he has not only built out a very strong academy roster, but he has a high school roster, 100 Thieves next as well. And when Papa Smithy came in, and again, it's going to take time for these players to grow to the point where they are LCS capable on 100 Thieves or on other teams. But, that's why we have a lot of these up and coming players that are pretty hyped on the 100 Thieves roster. Again, they were in the finals of Proving Grounds. And so the teams have built these infrastructures now, but just like
an up and coming young player called Zvenu, I saw one Champions Cup. I hope he gets a team. He looks like he has some real promise.
Well, we'll see if he comes back this next split somewhere or on Cloud9, depending on what they decide to do with their roster. Cloud9. Hopefully Cloud9. So anyway, this is all to say, though, that other teams have been building these infrastructures. It hasn't just been EG. EG was just willing to put these guys in very early on, or had roster holes that they needed filled, and so took the necessary risks. You don't have to replace Someday right now if you're 100 Thieves, which is where their kind of up and coming top laner might come into play, right? Some of the other players they have are not even 17 yet, so it's not even an option. But the teams have been much, much better about doing this, but it's just like China. In the first couple of years of China building out these very strong youth teams, it took till 2018 for these things to actually start bearing fruit. Because remember, the Shy was a Korean who was taken into these systems in China, trained for years when he was 15 years old living in China, and then once he's able to play, pop, here he comes up winning a world championship on IG. But he is the product of a Chinese training system. Right, he's not a product of a Korean training system. So these are the factors that I think come in, and we are going to see more talent, I think, coming out of NA, because it's not just EG. Other teams have been building these structures, which is good. So anyway, your message to the other owners is I think they are doing it, some of them at least already.
Even though I briefly name checked him earlier, because obviously my point was it's not as simple as get NA talent when you also have to put an asterisk and then go and get a Korean that's been playing for 10 years, whose grandfather did. Fuck off already. That checklist is already ruined, isn't it? It's not everyone can't go and do that. Spoiler, there's only one of them. There's maybe 3 now if you count Hooney and Someday as well. That's about it. So I actually think individually though, he also deserves mad credit for this run. Look at what Impact did in these bloody playoffs, mate. This guy is actually perennially underrated. Because why do these orcs keep letting him go? I even said this when Cloud9 did. I was that's one of the worst moves Cloud9 ever made, as far as I'm concerned. Just let Impact go, and then he immediately made a fucking dynasty in Team Liquid. So I don't get what these orcs don't see in this guy. To me, if you're in NA, from the moment he became grandfathered in, that was immediately one of your cheat codes to being the best NA team. Is sign Impact, then you put another star import in another role. Spoiler, we've already got half the team immediately right there. You've got the blueprint for a fucking domestic championship and go to Worlds. His consistency is fucking insane in LCS. If you ever look it up, I think he's missed playoffs once, the split when Doublelift ended up leaving. Every other time, he's always in the semi-finals. He's been in the final with 3 different orgs or something mental like that. This guy is unbelievable. And also, I always point this out, Monty. Everyone remembers when he plays the dog games and the tank games. Every playoff run, he always has a game like he did on the MonteCristo here, where he will just play a pick that isn't even the best champ, plays bloody Aatrox in the modern day, and he'll just be good on it, mate. He didn't in this particular series, but you know what I mean? He'll just pick a out of the pocket, in theory, more of a carry champ. He'll just do well. This guy's just a mega performer. What a fucking sick player.
Yeah. And I think the thing about Impact too is that he's, like you said earlier, he's just so consistent in his performances and he also ramps up in playoffs seemingly every time.
Yeah, it's really hard that as well. They all
plays better in
burnout. He seems like the guy I would go and ask, dude, because this guy manages to get his level back every time, even though, yes, at the beginning of every spring split, it looks like he's didn't really have his preseason and he's just warming up on company time that. But he does it. He made every time the playoffs come, he is back. He's right simmering at the temperature you'd want him at, isn't he? Like, this guy's just mastered. There's another part, by the way, that rookies will never be able to do, except for the very rare ones, is people who are veterans also learn, like, how to be a professional. Like, people like Perks just know how to warm up and get in the playoffs at the right time. They know sort of like which weeks I have to be at this point. And they know, by the way, that unlike the rogues of the world, you don't make it like a sprint straight out the gates. You don't be at your best on week one. Like, they sort of like get the ebbs and flows of being a pro. And Impact clearly's done that. Like, if I were with some of these GMs, I'd be trying to figure out how does he do it? Because he clearly doesn't do like the traditional Korean approach of like 14 hours a day League of Legends. But I can't think, I struggle to think of a time he ever let his team down in the playoffs.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially in NA, right? Like,
Model Pro,
they're really,
yeah.
he's an incredibly good known quantity to build a team around,
Yes.
which is part of, you know, why EG wanted to pick him up. If you look at the switchover, it couldn't have been more drastic from Huni to Impact, right? Like, these are these are players with very very opposite play styles, I would
this
say.
guy, even when he was in Korea, he was playing with bloody Faker in his prime and Piglet at the height of his ego. This guy is just, listen, he's fine playing weak side, boys. He's never even dreamed of a world where he's the true carry player. Like, you just give him the odd game, that's all he asks. Like, otherwise, just give him the best of the dog champions, let him go to work, let him earn that money.
All right, we want to talk about MSI a little bit.
All right.
It sounds like, I think we've already gotten into it. It sounds like you think RNG playing from China in a hermetically sealed container, forcing everybody onto 35 ping. You still think that they are probably not going to beat T1 at this event?
Yeah, I think, like, I don't think RNG or Top Esports would have. Like, I don't think, like, we actually had this conversation internally, and Lyric was kind of saying he thinks that Top Esports probably had the better chance at doing it, just because he thinks, like, the early game, maybe they can upset T1 in the early stages and then they can find some sort of win. Personally, I think RNG were probably the slightly better team to try and do it, because if they can kind of close up the early game, well, then they're better in the mid game, right? And you're not just going to fall behind to map play like Top Esports were, or like just the turtle style that T1 can play, or LCK in general can play. So, but both of us kind of agreed, and Ox included as well. We're just like, I don't think we're really going to stand a chance. This is the weakest I think the LPL representative has looked in quite a few years. And it just doesn't, there's just too many holes in the game plan. And it's kind of like, hey, look, maybe you can band-aid them over, but when you actually look at like how ferocious T1 are early game, how well they play the mid game, and yes, they can overextend at points, but I still think they're just over a best of 5 going to be able to take it.
Yeah, here's my point, is that because everyone's going to be on 35 ping, and that's not what T1 usually plays on, this is low-key actually activating Xiaohu's trap card, because now no one has hands. It's all about the mind. And he's a chess master, so it's just the anime storyline. In real life, I doubt it'll fucking up at all. And his jungler's going to get absolutely murked on 35 ping, by the way. Absolutely murked.
I do think, as I mentioned to you, Dagda, at the start, that we do have to go into this series with some tempered expectations, because T1, didn't look as good in the finals as they had throughout a lot of the season, because they literally had COVID while they were playing the game and felt like shit. And they made a lot of mistakes that I think they wouldn't have made in another situation. However, RNG playing online, teams always play different online than they do on stage, and things can get a little scrappier and a little scrimmier, because you're in more of, if you're sitting in the same room that you scrim in, it's hard to shift gears into stage mode and play more cautiously or play more conservatively for a lot of players, especially ones that are very used to playing on stage. So there's a possibility that we kind of saw a worse version of RNG throughout these playoffs than what they might play on stage. But then again, they're going to be playing remotely once more, right? Yeah. So they could flip into that mode again. So I think that's another point of consideration, is I felt like in both of these finals, for different reasons, we did not see the best iteration of either of these teams.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I do think though that, like, despite that, we had seen like issues from Way already. RNG definitely looked like more consistent than what we saw from them in playoffs. Like, well, I suppose the later portion of playoffs, but I still think that the issues were already there for RNG. I think they were just more exaggerated because of who top esports were, right? Top esports were all about early aggression. That's exactly what RNG were struggling at. So I think it just hyper exaggerated the issues that were there for RNG. But I still think like when T1 should be good enough to try and exploit that, even if it's not to the same extent as top esports, I still think they should be able to. Because I know LCK obviously a slower region and not going to like have 10 kills by the 15-minute mark, right? Like you're going to be taking at a much slower pace. But I still think with the way the T1 are able to orchestrate themselves in the map, I still think they're going to be able to catch out RNG at times. And I think a lot of it is, again, kind of coming back to how T1 kind of have that rolling play style of everyone moving around the map, at least from what I could see from them briefly in finals. Like you could see like Zeus roaming from top side to help mid. You would have like support roaming to top or to mid to try and help things out. Faker moving to either side lanes as well. It constantly felt like they were looking for the angle of attack in that early game. And I think that's where RNG struggle the most, because Bin likes to overextend, right? Bin like tends to just play these hyper aggressive lanes where he just wants to push consistently, where he could end up getting caught out. And at the beginning of the split, I think he was more prone to this. I think he got better as the split went on. But certainly, like he had, if he didn't get that early attention from Wei, he would end up getting caught out at times. I think the bot lane as well. I'm a bit worried about if you're not going to have Ming able to kind of get out and be much more of a roam-oriented player that, like we'd seen from in the past, more so than what we've seen in the current iteration of RNG. I just think that Carey is going to be able to kind of find bigger impacts. And I think it's more so the playstyle that RNG have shifted into from 2021 into 2022, which I think T1 are just going to be able to deal with easier.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. Unfortunately, like the tournament itself is unlikely to be very exciting outside of potentially some like best of one minor region upsets, which, always happen. They always happen at these events. So certainly, I'm sure people will get going a little bit again, but it does seem like we have a relatively clear 1 through 4 in terms of, T1 followed by RNG, followed by G2, followed by
I will
Here's
say,
what I'm going to do, by the way.
All I'm going to do, and I was
Ah,
completely
you
wrong
go.
about EDG. So who the hell? I'm completely wrong again.
Yeah.
Here's I think all I'm going to do is this, Monty. I'm going to wait until T1 wins the competition and everyone starts celebrating and talking about. I'm going to go, what are you talking about, guys? You all told me for the last 3 or 4 years, coincidentally, when Korea wasn't winning MSI, that MSI doesn't really matter. It's a meaningless tournament. You shouldn't even try. You should just save yourself for Worlds. So obviously, I'll just say LPL teams are doing that. So balls back in your court, LCK.
All right.
See if you can maybe not destroy all your own mental over a fucking shitty exhibition tournament. Don't say anything, Dagda. Just stay nice and poker face, mate. It's all right. All right.
Dagda loves Asian games.
I know it's bleeding into this.
Hangzhou Asian Games number 1, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Dagda thinks the LPL should be crunched into 4 or 5 weeks so that we can have Hangzhou Asian Games. There we go.
Oh, and by the way, it goes without saying that when G2, who all play on 35 ping anyway, low-key beat RNG in a best of 5, the internet will melt down. But I'm waiting for it. I'm here for it, okay? I like it when shit... I like the joke. I just like it when shit gets crazy. So I'm here for it, boys.
So I want to address a rumor that popped up today, which is that Uzi might be going to JDG, according to like leaks from Uzi's agent, which... pretty interesting, especially because I'm
watching team. Is he cool?
So what is your take on this? What is your take?
I feel sorry for Hope. Honestly, like Hope honestly has been a really good AD carry. Like not only this split, but like he was EDG 2020. He genuinely looked really good. And then Viper came along, and you can't really argue with like Viper. Like the guy's a monster. But Hope is actually one of the good AD carries that we have in the league. So it feels like he's only just got back into being like a possibility in the LPL, and now to potentially be put into the LDL again is kind of sad. But I don't know. Like, look, I'm a big Uzi fan. I don't know if people can see it. I've even got like a little Uzi box over here with like a beer that's signed by him and Uzi caps that I got from China and everything. Like, I love Uzi. Been a fan of him since season 3. I think he sucked this split. Like, he had his moments where he looked really, really good. But realistically, he didn't look comfortable playing things like the Jinx and these mobile carries where it's not about your mechanics, it's about like how well you position, and he got caught out a lot. A bit of a caveat on that.
His Zeri and Ezreal were good.
Yeah, I think definitely his Ezreal was really, really good. That series against V5, it was basically rookie versus Uzi, was unbelievable. If you have a bit of time, you haven't seen it, well, we're going to give it a watch. Game 3 was just class. But I still think like the Jinxes didn't look so good. I don't think he actually played the Aphelios in the end as well. I'll have to double check that. But like there were certain picks where he just didn't look like he was up to the meta. And I think maybe if we start to see a shift into like more things like Ezreal and Xerxes and things you can be a bit more of a performer on, I think he'd be all right. But and sorry, as a caveat to that as well, it did feel like he had a little bit of a global taunt on him, because there was like one fight where that I remember where he's like walking in front of the entrance to Baron Pit. He's got his mid laner Fofo on Victor completely on his own, and all the Jarvan has to do is just go for Fofo. And 3 people flash over Baron Wall instead of just killing Fofo to kill Uzi. And I was like, you have the Victor right there. So easy to kill. And they're like, Uzi though. So he definitely had a bit of a taunt on him where everyone wanted to kill him. But I still think like I think Doggo at the end of the day was the right choice for the team. I think he was more consistent. Like even if
he's got a player right now.
Yeah. And I think Doggo I think
Andy doesn't require you to play permanent protect the poppy shit over whatever the fuck does he. That's the downside. The downside of Uzi is this. Uzi came back Bjergsen style, like nothing's changed, boys. I'm back. It's like, dude, it's been years since you played. We can't put all the resources in you. Like that only worked when he was the absolute best.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is that like he's not at the tippy top that he was. I think the 80 carries we have in the league as well have leveled up.
Oh, like, some mega players now in that position, yes.
Exactly. So when you start to look at it, it's like, is it really worth trying to give all these resources to him? Not really. And in a position where even he gets them, can he really carry? Like, I don't really think he's able to in the same. Like, I'd rather give those resources to Viper, to be perfectly honest. Like, if I'm looking at the mega carry, I'm looking at Viper.
Well, I also think he didn't. I think he didn't play badly, and he got some good leads in the games that I saw. But the problem is, like, that's not the problem with Billy Gaming. Like, he would get big leads and they just would be unable to play around them at certain points in time. So I felt like it didn't really matter whether it was Doggo or Uzi, because they would have lost either way in a lot of these situations, because they had deeper teamwork problems than Uzi was going to be able to fix from the 80 carry position. And for JDG, I mean, I actually hate watching this team. I hated watching them through the whole playoffs, because anytime they get into a fight in the enemy jungle, they will literally just pursue somebody through they will literally run after somebody through the entire map, no matter what. They're like a dog chasing a bone, right? And so
they always get that man. That's the thing.
I mean, sometimes they get hit by the car.
Marshals of JDG.
Sometimes they get hit by a car.
Okay.
So the thing about JDG is, like, for me, they're very frustrating to watch, because I think they over pursue significantly a lot of the time. And my question is, does Uzi prevent them from, does he fix any flaws that this team has? And my answer is no. So, like, what's the point?
I think he also throws a wrench into the work to the way JDG want to play, right? Because like they're very much a case of, hey, look, we want to like play off of bot lane pressure. We look for some invades, get like some vision control, see if we can look for picks and this kind of stuff, and play pretty heavily around dragons. And like that's a lot of the way that they kind of worked around their mid game, their early game. But Uzi wants to play for lane, right? Like Uzi just wants to out 2v2 you, and you're paired with Missing, who is not a very strong support when it comes to the laning phase. Like that was actually one of the big reasons he cited, like coming off of WE, was that like he wasn't able to go and roam. He didn't feel comfortable playing with Elk in the 2v2 because Elk wanted to be aggressive. And now you're bringing in Uzi, who's basically just the same version as that, if not more so. So you're not actually going to be able to win the 2v2 in the way Uzi wants. You're not going to be able to play for Kanavi in the way that Kanavi wants to, because, well, you're now putting all your resource into bot lane, or at least Uzi's going to be trying to play for himself in bot lane. So it kind of just throws a wrench into the works around the way JDG want to play. So I don't really know. I felt like Hope was actually kind of a good fit for that team, because it felt like, hey, you know, he's stable. He's going to be able to play his lane state out correctly, like perfectly happy to go and play for invades or for dragons if you need to. And you're kind of giving 369 a bit of free reign as well to be a mega carry if he wants to be. Well, when given the opportunity, things like Kennen. So I think putting Uzi into that kind of just throws a lot of the work that we saw and the growth that we saw from JDG out the window over the course of the split. So unless they're starting to replace like his support and stuff as well, I just don't really see that team working with someone like Uzi on it.
Yeah, unfortunately. Do you think there's a team that you would like to see Uzi on that you think would be better than this one, if you could put him on a team?
Surely the problem now, like I say, is unless he's going to like level up his fucking amount of activity, he needs to be on a team where they're allowed to just play hard through him. So it can't be a top team, unfortunately, I don't think. Probably has to be like a mid-table team, right?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't really know if there is a team where he'd be able to slot into right now. Like, I feel like even the top teams all have insane AD carries, right?
A lot of good ADCs,
maybe into I know this might be a bit weird, but someone like V5, like Rookie, honestly, when he had Jackie Love on the team, was able to play a relatively like low econ game. Like even when you look at 2020, I think he had like 23% of the team's gold or some insanely low figure and was still popping the hell off
carrying,
with like 28% of the team's damage or something. So honestly, I think that could be the situation because now you have a strong bot laner that you can try and focus around, that it's not just a case
but you also
of,
have
well,
PP God, so
yeah. So that's where I'd be like, all right, let's see who else we can bring in. But yeah, I think that's where the next question would be. But honestly, like Gal and Ming, I think are pretty set in RNG. LNG, I don't think the issue is their bot lane. I don't think Light and Luma or Light and Awandi are the actual issue on that team. Like they've got a ton of issues with the way that their mid jungle works and how they try
And I
to
think
play
most
around
people
outside
think
lane.
Light's a bit of a sleeper, right? He's usually pretty good.
Yeah, and then you got Jackie Love, you got Fong, you got Viper, then you're into like Doggo Uzi. Rare Adam could probably use them. But I think that team has a ton of issues again that I don't think Uzi solves, replacing iBoy. And then you know Elderbricks and Hung are the only real good thing about FPX. So I mean that's out of our playoff team. So I mean you don't really get to, there's no one really there. You're like, oh yeah, well Uzi slots in there and instantly fixes everything they have.
The other thing I find weird as well is this. When I watch the other regions, Dagda, at the end, I actually feel like very satisfied. Like I kind of know like all the narratives sort of got resolved genuinely. Like EG got to beat all the top teams to win their league. Like G2 actually went through all the big names to win. T1 played everyone. But actually the LPL, every split ends. And I always have more questions than answers because like this playoff was a great example. There was so many teams near the top that just the bracket alone was going to determine who won this tournament, not who was the best necessarily. Like, I look at this bracket, dude, and I think to myself, like, mate, what if EDG was on the other side? What if, like, fucking Jingdong doesn't fluke that series at the end? What if RNG doesn't even get into the double Olymp point? Like, I think if you replay this whole playoffs for the LPL, you could have more teams win it than any other region. You could have, like, 3 or 4 different teams be the champion here, right? And go to MSI.
I agree. I mean, even looking at like the potential for V5, right? It feels like if they're on the opposite side of the bracket, I think and then RNG ends up knocking out top, but maybe we're in an entirely different story, right? I do think like some of the teams that we had at the bottom though, like I think unfortunately for EDG, I think they just had too many issues this split. Like I would have loved to see EDG kind of going back like, oh yeah, world champions, go to MSI, but JJ took a massive step down. It felt like Flandre was all over the place as well. So I don't know. It felt like at least from like JDG kind of like say round 3 onwards, and we got like JDG, even Weibo in there to a certain extent, you kind of felt like maybe these teams could all come out on top. And I think that was even the conversations we were having leading into this was like, it really, you don't know what way this top 4 are going to go. And I think even if you look at like our predictions, pretty much every single desk was split between the analysts, between the play-by-plays, everything. Like no one really knew. But I don't, again, kind of agree with you. I don't feel like we got an answer, right? It kind of felt like, oh, well, yes, RNG can play a better mid game than top esports. That's my answer from finals, right? But I don't like, I still think personally V5 are probably the better team than RNG. Like they actually had a stronger mid jungle. They were able to play a mid game. So if we got V5 versus RNG, like what would that have looked like? So I don't know. I agree. I think there's like a ton of different ways that this bracket could have panned out. And it kind of felt like it was just a case of whichever, like even when you look, I think it was like, game score came down to basically decide like are 3 to 6. So if you had picked up one extra game across the course of it, that would have, you're on a different side of the bracket. This whole thing could have gone different. So yeah, it was all a bit nuts, and it does feel like, I don't know, I won't say it's like it's delighted to see RNG go, and I'm not going to say it's like hollow or anything like that, but I definitely feel like I don't got a concrete answer that RNG are the best team in the LPL, because it feels like I want to kind of run this basically these top 3 to another like round robin of these best of 5s just to see what way it goes.
Indeed. Oh, by the way, just because we didn't talk about them much, you mentioned Weibo, basically. This is the team, if people don't know, that the Shy went to. But believe it or not, the Shy actually, I don't know if he got finally he had one night where he couldn't sleep and thought, have I been in 10 games? He was actually pretty good this split. Like, he cleaned his act up a bit, it looked like. If people know how it got in IG at the end, he actually sort of turned his shit around, right?
Yeah, and I think it was really cool to see. And I'm also kind of excited because there's a lot of rumors around like what happened at the start of the split, which was like Rookie and the Shy were supposed to go to the same team, and then there was a thing at the last minute, so the Shy couldn't join Rookie. So I think it'd be cool to see like how he actually, if that character development sticks, or if he gets back to play with Rookie and we kind of get what we saw on IG. But I definitely think it was cool to see his kind of growth, and even just the style, right? Because like you look at like I think when he was on IG, actually, he kind of just threw his bot lane under the bus and was like, hey, you know, I could play tanks, but that would require me to have a strong team that I can play a tank.
Exactly.
And he comes on to Weibo and he's actually playing tanks. And we're like, Jesus, you were kidding. Like the whole time you actually could play tanks. He looked really good on them. So I definitely think it's like, if you can get him in the right mindset and if he actually has a team around him that he can trust, he's going to look great. And I'm excited to see, like, hey, look, maybe he ends up going to V5 and we end up with like the Shy replacing Rich. Maybe that could be an incredible team where you've actually got someone who can carry from the top. You've got like a tank player that can actually set up for someone like Photic as well. That could be cool. But I honestly have no idea what like he's going to look like in summer, because it definitely feels like a case of, hey, if he has a team around him where he's like, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the team rather than I have to carry, we can see this performance from him. Or we'll end up going back to IG where he's like, no, I have to be the carry. I have to play like a maniac and hope that I can coin flip every game.
By the way, even though it's like an obscure take, I actually low-key blame Rookie for the Shy's weird attitude in teams. And here's why. Because if you ever see interviews with the Shy, he is totally convinced that in all those teams that they had, him and Rookie are like the package, like we're talking about now. And that, like, if you read the interviews, he thinks they're like similar players. And he would always talk in these interviews about how like it's everyone else on the team who's inting, and then him and Rookie have to like carry. And I would just be reading these interviews like, holy shit, like, Rookie, are you never going to fucking say something at this point in time? Like, because, like, dude, like, my joke is like, in terms of like actually playing like responsible League of Legends, like leading the team, like, he deserves credit in the same way as there's that old joke from Family Guy about how like Matt Damon's only contribution to the writing of Good Will Hunting was like smoking weed while like Matt Damon did all the Ben Affleck rather, while Matt Damon wrote the script. Like, that's how I imagine the Shy. He's the fucking guy. Thing about me and you, Rookie, is, oh, it's so hard working, bro. It's like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're the most egregious. I even said this. He might be, I have him as the best top laner ever, but he's one of the most egregious inters to ever play League of Legends. And with no conscience as well. That's the craziest thing. He doesn't ever seem like he actually like takes it to heart. Like, did I fuck up the game? No, he never does. Like the bloody bot lane again. Like, what? You're playing like Vladimir, fucking going up solo killing people. Like, what? He's so bad, isn't he? He's so bad. I love him though. I love him, dude. You couldn't write an anime character as ridiculous as the Shy. That's
the least self-aware man I think I've ever met.
I love it though.
You haven't met Doublelift, so I
that's true. Again, he did say man, so whatever.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I think we're gonna take some viewer questions, Dagda. So we will bid you adieu. Thanks for coming on. Great to talk to you about the LPL.
Monty, I just realised though, a parting shot. All I'll say is this: I think you fans took it too far. That's not actually what protect the Doublelift means. It doesn't mean just protect him when he's wrong from the consequences of his actions. There's actually a comp inside the game, the way you play stylistically. So
the Zoomer fans are just so used to protecting their celebrities that they now misinterpret the application of in-game strategy. There you go.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Dagda, for coming on. Great talking to you about LPL.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Right, time for viewer questions. How does one ask a viewer question? Not in Twitch chat. How does one ask one, Monty?
You go to the Insight on Esports Discord server and you get yourself some high-quality grog coins, 25 of them, and then you can get into the SI questions channel, the Grog Coin 25, and then you too can ask questions. If you're wondering how to do that, go to the Grog Coin Lounge, look at the pinned post, and there you go. That's how you get.
By the way, for anyone out there who's like, oh, you have to pay money and the value can go up. Yeah, if you imagine we're going to see it as a negative, that we've created a filtering system based around elitism and how much you're willing to put into this interaction to keep people from asking us stupid questions. I don't think you know who we are. You haven't figured out the branding of this show.
Also, this is, you buy the grog coins, but then you just sit on them and they've gone up like by 400%. So, no, you could sell them anytime you want as well. So you enjoy that, guys. You enjoy
whatever you want. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not like a Twitch subscription or a Patreon. You can do whatever the fuck you want with them. Also, shout out to our new grog coin holder with the great name Architect of Korean Esports Based Joe.
There you go.
You guys keeping it real with the Discord.
I like it.
That's fucking hilarious. Anyway, And also, all of you people who are now doing Butt Pounder 420 iterations, props to you guys too, because our new one, a pound of butt 1564.
Quite a good one. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
You guys just do these different ones now. Can you recommend any operas or specific productions of certain operas? Sure. I actually took not singing coursework. I am a terrible singer, but opera history when I lived in Ireland and went to Trinity. So I don't know. I do like Wagner. I like the Ring Cycle. I do like I do like Mozart's operas. I like some of the more I would say flowery Italian operas as well. So I don't know. I do you have any opera preferences? Like I like Puccini. I like Turandot.
I know almost nothing about opera, so I can't do opera. I could do like plays if you want. Like if you ever want like a banging niche movie that's really good, there's a film version of the play Marat Sade, which is about when the Marquis de Sade was in the inmate asylum and the inmates take over these houses. But there's a really good film version of that. That's like again, it's a bit obscure as a concept, but put it this way: even though like if you look up what it's all about, you'll think ours is too art house. It's not actually. It's just really good. Like the actors in it do a mega job.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great play. I also have taken multi-year courses in drama history, so I can do that as well because I did act. But Boris Godunov is another one by Mussorgsky. I don't really like most modern operas. I don't like musicals, but I do like opera and I do like operettas. So I am amused by Gilbert and Sullivan. If you want Here's a movie take about the creation of an operetta. There is a biopic about Gilbert and Sullivan, about the making of the Mikado called Topsy Turvy. That is a fucking great movie. So there's a opera adjacent movie that you can watch that is very good. If you were to write an anime script about LoL Esports in an alternate universe, what are some of the things you'd change from reality? Mine would be Apto going over to the LPL, following his Korean exile, and enacting his revenge on Faker at Worlds. I mean, obviously that would be the Apto Faker, like Faker, Dark Faker storyline is something we were fucking robbed of in this esport, which is really sad. So yes, that would obviously, I mean, it was already basically just like a perfect anime plot line as it was.
Especially because, unfortunately, even like the level to which China had the appetite to import was out of sync with Apto's like time he was caring about being a pro, because essentially he was a year or two before they got to the point that they would just sign anyone for big money. Because if you look at it, like in the modern day now, if China knew what you know now, like they do offer Fraker like 20 mil, etc. Like now you could actually probably give him the money. Wait, do it, mate. We'd maybe try playing for an LPL team. And actually, this is one of the rare areas where the fact that like China just has fucking Riot in their back pocket might actually have worked out, Monty. They might actually have let him bloody play in the LPL if they'd like specifically petitioned it. So it might even have been possible. Just sadly, obviously never happened. I'm trying to think what would be some other good anime angles. Let me think. What's another good one? Like what would make for a really good storyline that we were robbed of? Like the obvious one to me, I actually think the most costly of all the fucking exports out of Korea was Mata, because even though he came back later and even though he eventually was good in the LPL, like you can tell he just phoned it in for a year or two after that, and like he never was the same player afterwards. Like here's what the problem: when he came back, especially, he was just the brain at that point in time. That guy was an amazing straight up actual player when he was on Samsung White as well. He was like the best. That's why he was like Mad Life. He was the best at the role and then the best as like a captain and the other shit as well. So like to me, if he could have kept that up, if he could have just kept going from Samsung White on, that could have been another interesting angle. Because think about it, right? Then you have like an amazing captain in the region battling these great individual players, Smeb and Faker, and like that's the real thing that robbed. If people don't get it, as much as there was some cool LPL storylines, it does suck that in the history of League of Legends, we'll never know what happens if all the Koreans stay in Korea.
I mean, that's the biggest one.
Like, teams ever, right?
I mean, probably the best anime storyline that we were actually robbed of was Rookie going to China. Imagine if Rookie had stayed in Korea for all these years and we got to see like fucking 10 years now of a Faker Rookie domestic rivalry.
I looked it up, dude, and apparently they've only ever played something mad like the 2B01s at that MSI or something. Like they've never, like, even though these are the main two rivals like ever for GOAT, there's just not, like, dude, imagine if like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning just played in the opposite conferences and met once in a final, once ever. There'd be no fucking storyline, would there? That's what sucks. I agree with you, mate. The idea those two were like amazing all these years, and they were just like fucking star-crossed lovers, can never interact. Like, what? That's whack as fuck.
And we got robbed of it again because V5 just decided to lose during these playoffs. So we actually had a chance to have it at this MSI.
Oh, I know what it is. I know what the real ultimate. I figured it out. It's obvious. Even it's obvious. The ultimate anime storyline is Faker did go to the LPL. Now there is a fucking crazy anime storyline.
So what if you did the reverse? What happened in 2015, which is all the other players stay in Korea.
There you go. That's a good one.
The only one that goes to China.
Yes,
that would actually be very interesting.
I'll give you another cool one. Here's another fun one. Right. People never thought this was possible, but I've heard there'd been the odd offer from like mid-table to the other crazy one would be, knowing what we know now, what if some Korean team said, fuck even the language barrier, we'll just take an Uzi eye?
Yep.
Remember, the Korea never had ADCs like that, boys. Even the ADCs like that had to go to China, Imp, Midstick, etc. They never had like the hard carry ADC. So I'd love to see like some like amazing Korean team just play hard around Uzi eye. That would be the most unique Korean team ever. The Faker going to China one would be fucking lit though. That's a good one. That is a good one. That is a good one.
Next question. Nowadays, we have Age of Empires 4 events running and names popping up are a mixture of all the major RTS. The top 4 Golden League right now are Marine Lord, the Viper, Beastie Cutie, Vortex.
Oh, so all the StarCraft 2 players play.
Yeah, StarCraft 2 players. Yeah. Any Warcraft 3 players you would like to see nowadays? Obviously Moon, dude. Like, I would love to see. Moon's out of the military. He has been for a couple of years. It'd be really fun to see him come back. Grubby would be another one. If none, share some stories about the Warcraft 3 scene. Okay, I got one for you. All right. Very early on, not very early on in Warcraft 3, but Warcraft 3 was obviously like a really scuffed esport in like 2005. And when I was a freshman in college, I was casting Warcraft 3, and I went to this is a defunct organization now called Global Gaming League, and GGL had a LAN at the Javits Center, which is like the convention center in New York City, and I was going to college in upstate New York. So I took the train down for a weekend, and everybody in Warcraft 3, including the pro players at that point, were like so poor that basically we all scraped together money. I slept on the floor of a hotel room that like Grubby was in. And I didn't. So Radio ITG
it was pretty common back then, though, that people did stuff like crash on the floor.
Oh, just
to get to the event, obviously.
Yeah. So I had to pay my own money to go. Yes. I had to pay my own money to go. And so I showed up, and Radio ITG was doing the broadcast, and I was, a Warcraft 3 caster at the time. And so that was DJ Wheat's organization. So I showed up, and I was like, hey, you don't have a Warcraft 3 caster. I'm a Warcraft 3 caster. And he knew who I was because I was working with Team Sportscast Network, which was what D-Man was also on back in the day. And so I got to cast this event.
Those guys.
I got to cast this event, but it was basically just because I showed up to this place in New York City that I was casting it and sleeping on like Grubby's hotel room floor. And so anyway, the Grubby goes on to like, I forget if he was. Am I confusing two events? I might be confusing two events. No, I'm not.
I can look it up if you want.
No. Grubby ends up doing very well at this event. I don't know if he wins or if he just places like in the top 2 or something like that, because Moon was at this event as well. He had flown over from Korea, so that was the first time I had ever met him. And Grubby gets like one of those oversized checks from winning this event. And I have a video of this on some ancient digital camera somewhere, where we go to like one of those sketchy like payday check cashing facilities, and as a joke he tries to like cash this giant check, and he's like trying to stuff it through the like slots with all like the bulletproof glass, and it's just fucking hilarious because this person like doesn't know how to react to this situation. So I do legitimately have a video of Grubby doing this somewhere, but it was just such a fucking scuffed esports experience overall. It was just that that's just how Warcraft 3 was back in the day. So yeah, I go way back with some of these guys. What is the narrative you would want corrected or is the most inaccurate for the sake of LOL history? Marin in 2015, Royal Club favored by the analyst desk in 2013.
I would probably say the Marion one because here's the problem. To this day, if you say who is the GOAT top laner, there is a decent amount even of experts who will throw Naren's name out there. And in my opinion, he ain't even on the shortlist. So I think that one's mad egregious. Don't worry though, boys, because here's the thing. This is actually, like I said in that video I did about CS on my channel, this is an area I'm going to lean heavily into on my YouTube channel, is I'm going to do a bunch of videos where I just get the Wikipedias out of all the tournament stuff. And I just sort of like, it's called narrative mechanic, and I'm just going to correct what I think are a bunch of nonsense narratives that got way out of control. Like, I'll give you an example, Monty. I'll give a little teaser for people. I've got one scripted already that's about your career when you coach CLG, because they present your career as though it's the last week of what happened in CLG. That was the whole thing. They ignore that, like, you know, you fucking had your team like head of TSM at one point, and then you like almost made the finals, and then you actually were like leading the league in the split. Yep. So there's a whole like wait and see. When you actually put the context in, it's so different from the real narrative.
I was one game away from making the finals over TSM in the spring split of that year, and then we got clowned on by Bjergsen's Twisted Fate, but it was close. I mean, it came down to the last game of that series. So
yeah. So I think when you put all the context in, you'll see how different it is. So I actually want to do a series like that instead of just ranting on Twitter. I'm actually going to do content about this because also I think, quite frankly, who else is in a better position? I was there, I did all the history, so why don't I just show you quickly the history? By the way, I would love it if a war historian did this, like a 5-minute version about why, like, I don't know, something that World War II had to happen that way, and he showed you the whole document. It'd be the shit, wouldn't it? The whole problem with that sort of stuff is it's too lengthy. You know?
I mean, I'm still deeply offended about the take that TSM had a real shot at Worlds in 2014.
Oh, it's mental.
That narrative also tilts me to the fucking.
I already did that one though, Monty. I've actually done that one, in fact. And all you need to know is this. This is how far we've come, boys. Even Amazing liked the tweet. And I was low-key referring to him in it. So, fair play, Amazing. Okay, I see you. Okay.
What has been the most fulfilling job either of you have had outside of esports? Honestly, in college, I was like cooking in a Thai restaurant during the summers, and I really love cooking, and I still do it all the time myself, and it's been a skill that I've honed over many years now, and I got to learn from Thai people how to make Thai food, and that was great. I found that very fulfilling.
I've only had one other job. I was a paper boy, and even then there's a story, which is I earned all the money that you could earn for, like, I don't know, let's say like a year or something. And then in England, especially, it's traditional as part of the Christmas spirit that at Christmas you give your paper boy a tip, right? But you are technically also giving him the tip to sort of encourage him to do a good job next year. I waited until Christmas, got all the tips, and then just quit, and then used the money to buy an N64. That's the end of my story. And after that, I only ever worked one job, esports. Not even once. Not even. Take a picture of my young, youthful face and take the picture of this weathered face now. Esports, not even once. Not even once.
Is there a sadder sight in professional sports than the crowd at a Miami Marlins game? Yeah, TSM fans at a League of Legends game at an international event. That's pretty sad. You have any more depressing sports event stories?
Not really.
All right. You guys make hosting and casting look so effortless that it becomes an unpleasant shock to hear amateurs step up to the plate. Monty, any tips for Latigris to improve her casting? Thorin, any tips for Double Lift to improve his podcast hosting?
I'll give you a very brief one right now because it's actually an area that I've noticed so many hosts are fucking appalling at in esports. It's pretty simple. They don't listen. When they're finished talking, you see him permanently on the second monitor reading Twitch chat. By the way, if I'm a guest on your show and I talk about something and you start laughing when it's not appropriate, I realize you're just laughing at Twitch chat, like I'm this close to just leaving the call. Like, why don't you just have Twitch chat on your own and stream, mate? Like, you're not in a convo with me. So one of the reasons that I think it's, believe it or not, Monty, as much as people think I talk too much and I interrupt too much, I'm fucking amazing at listening. I can actually track what people are saying, what they said on past episodes, what, like, even from the way they're talking, I get a sense of like what they might want to talk about next, what they haven't yet spoken about. Like, listening is a fucking skill. You have to work on it. You really have to build it up a lot. And also, most people can't handle listening for 3 hours in a row. They get fatigued. Like, there's a skill to it. You're going to sort. So I would say if I'm double, if first and foremost, the hack to learning it in the short term is this: Don't have Lena book your guest. Pick people you're really interested in and use it as an excuse to do a little bit of research and then ask them the questions you want to ask them. That'll actually authentically get you a really great convo. And then in doing so, because you're really interested, you'll be listening to the answers. And because you're following the answers, you'll then know what to ask next. And it'll start to even be obvious, because as this guy says, when you put in 1 billion reps, you just get the form, you get the technique, you master it. So I would just say to start out, like, because here's the best thing. If you follow your curiosity, you're not being dragged. You feel impelled that direction. You want to go that direction.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, why I don't just go for the biggest name guests, you notice sometimes every now and then I'll throw in a guest a fan might not even care about, like Jensen Gorsman, because I'm actually interested. Like, for example, he's a guy who has a very interesting modeling system. So I'll just bring on a weird guy that you guys might not care about, but who I want to talk to this week. That's a good tip, I think.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think on the casting side of things for LeTigris, I think LeTigris, in the cast that I've heard, she has good vocal technical abilities, and she knows she's very clearly like knowledgeable about the champion's kits and like everything like that. So she checks a lot of the boxes for a play-by-play caster. I think that if I had to give her advice, I think there's 2 things for LeTigris. One of them is that it's incredibly important to remember that in esports, because there is no ball, and this is to say that there isn't a focal point of action that people are naturally attracted to look at on the screen, right? Which means that in every esports, basically, that isn't Rocket League, guys, because it actually literally has a ball, or to a lesser degree CSGO, which is the bomb, but even the bomb you don't really see. It's just kind of like on an icon on your screen, and it could be sitting on the ground and blah, 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 right? It's not necessarily the focal point of the action until it's being planted. The thing with esports is that the play-by-play caster has to recognize what the ball, quote unquote, is, right? And it is incredibly important to realize as a play-by-play what is the priority ability. When you have 10 different champions doing things, you have to be able to instantly read what is the biggest play happening on the screen and focus on that one thing that is going on. And that is, I think, her flaw, is that she doesn't always know where the ball is. And that's something that you can certainly improve on, but that's what I would start working on if I were her. The other thing about LeTigris is that in her interviews as well, and in her casts, she has a rough time transitioning and making tosses. So what I mean by that is that when she is doing an interview, at the conclusion of an interview, she will often, her way of transitioning out of an interview is to repeat the last thing that the interview subject has said, and then like toss it to Dash or finish the interview with that.
Basic throws ever, and he's confident on that match, but what do you think, Dash? Will they win the game?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that. And she kind of just awkwardly trails off sometimes too. And for me, what I want to see out of LeTigris is more of LeTigris's own personality and banter and rapport with the pro players, right? And so I wish we got to see more LeTigris in LeTigris's interviews and more LeTigris in LeTigris's casts, because it feels like she's trying so hard to be this ultra polished interviewer that's doing everything technically right that I don't really get a sense of her rapport with the person she is talking to. And it's just not fun, to be honest. Like I don't feel like her interviews bring out the best aspects of the pro players. And in fact, sometimes like when Abadage is cursed in the past in the interview, she gets quite awkward, which makes it seem worse than it is, instead of just like vibing with Abadage in that moment and rolling with it, because ultimately you always just have to roll with it no matter what happens.
And just make a joke like, watch out, you'll get fined.
Yeah, exactly. So it ends up like just kind of derailing or making the segment more awkward. And I guess in her cast too, with her color commentators, I think she's really focused on like, doing the technical aspects of the play-by-play correctly. That, to your point, Thorin, what you were saying earlier, I feel like sometimes she's not listening to her color caster, or she doesn't like bring in the color narratives or transition smoothly between herself and the color caster. So those are the 2 things that I would say she has to work on. But I think that in terms of her own diction, tone, vocal abilities, I think she does have quite a bit of polish. So I think it's more focus and interaction that are the things that need to be improved.
By the way, as someone who's been an analyst, obviously in CSGO, I can tell you one thing I always massively appreciated, which ties into what you're talking about, which is casters, which when they're listening to my analyst desk segments, actually listen to the points and integrate them into their cast. Like a lot of the people who are mates of mine, Moses, Anders, Semler, Sadikis, they would always take like a great point I had on the desk and make it part of the game. Like if in the game it was playing out in some sense, like I said, watch out for this player in this context, or this guy's like, they would like tie it in. Oh, this is what we saw on the desk. But that's a great way to make the show feel super fucking integrated. Your teammates, by the way, feel like they're on your team. So the problem I have with Latigris is this. I actually think she's got a very good quality, which is she genuinely seems enthusiastic. I don't think she's faking it. She actually really seems to enjoy watching these LCS games, which I was joking with Dagda because I find it hard to see how some of the people who watch like the highest level league can really bring themselves. Like I've told you before, I almost think like LS, it's almost like fucking masochism that he does streams about LCS. He hates that type of League of Legends. It's not his shit. But the one problem I think she really has, unfortunately, Monty, is something I don't think is escapable, which is I noticed that a common thing people who don't like her say is they think her voice is annoying. And unfortunately, that's something I remember we used to get leveled at Froscoring. And the problem I have is this. Not for me, like I would never had a problem with Froscoring's voice, but I can see how to someone that might seem like her voice was a bit whiny was Froscoring's. Like I can see how it might annoy someone. And the reason why I say that's it's a touchy topic is because you want to go, well, it doesn't matter, does it? But unfortunately, like being a caster, there's only 2 or 3 people allowed on the camera at that moment to talk. Being liked by the audience is a massive element in it, no matter what you think. And I can't decide that. So that's up to the fans to figure out on that one. I don't really know you can change your voice entirely. Like,
I mean, I don't have that problem with either Frosk or Latigris.
I've never had it myself, but it just seems like a common complaint. Like I say, look, I don't hate it. Like I've had casters where I just didn't like the voice, Has that happened with me before?
Yep, that's true. All right. I actually don't know what this question is. I don't understand this question. Is it reasonable to say Bjergsen is not used to playing in a system that does not involve Reggie diving 200 miles per hour for the jungler? I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
I assume it means like that Reginald would just come in and fuck up the jungler every time TSM was going bad. I think that's what he's trying to imply.
Yeah, I don't think that's the issue. I don't think that's the issue here. Also, is there a super team paradox? No matter how a super team is built, there is a minimum of one meta where teams cannot figure out how to navigate it, contradictory to what a super team represents. What I think he's saying is a concept with a super team when you design a super team to be effective in a meta, and you don't necessarily know when you're creating the super team what the next meta for League of Legends is, because you have to create a roster before you even know what the changes to the game are, much less how those changes are going to affect the professional scene. It does affect super teams. Like obviously, like a super team for 1 year that you think might be great with changes to the overall meta could be absolute dog shit the next year, which is why mid-season adjustments between spring and summer splits are becoming more common. Because that's the only time where you actually have the evidence of what the year's meta is going to be. So yeah, I do think it's really hard to make a super team in this game because they changed the game so fucking much.
And I also just think, even though it does suck a little bit as a fan, that's just unfortunate the way League of Legends is. Like, if the meta changes enough, it doesn't matter if you're the best, you won't win. I don't believe there's ever been, I genuinely don't, Monty, I don't believe there has ever actually been a 5-man lineup in League of Legends that could play all the metas and win Worlds. Therefore, Worlds is about getting lucky. Just inherently. That's just the nature of the game, The difference is in CSGO, you actually could. There have been teams that were number 1 when the meta wasn't the perfect for them. That's happened. But that's because too many elements remain the same. Like in League, it's just not that way. That's why, to me, League actually as an esport, it's way more appropriate to compare it to things like Magic the Gathering, in my opinion. In Magic the Gathering, if it's the wrong set of cards and you get a bit of bad luck in the tournament, you come 7th and you're the best player in the world. That is the way the game is. It's way more aligned like that than the games like Quake and Counter-Strike. These are the games where if you're number 1, you go to number 1. If you have a bad day, you come number 2. If not, you're number 3. Like League isn't as correlated as that, in my opinion, with like raw skill or player ability. It's a different game.
Favorite detective movie or game? I mean, I love film noir. So
what about for movie then? What would be the best detective movie?
Like the best. Oh man, that's a tough one. So many good films.
Is it going to be like a classic film noir? You're going to go?
Oh yeah, Maltese Falcon,
like Big Sleep.
Yeah, I don't
Maltese
like
Falcon.
I don't like the Big Sleep as much as I like the Maltese Falcon.
Chinatown.
Chinatown maybe is the best one.
It's a pretty good one, especially the fucking casting.
Yeah,
pretty banging. And also Chinatown sort of like itself, sort of like a meta-contextual commentary on the tropes of film noir, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It's a more of a neo-noir. I mean, also, I mean, you could go like sci-fi noir, like Blade Runner, be another one, right?
Let me think what I would pick for this. Let me think, because I'm going to try and pick something obscure for you. So it's something like, because since he says detective, there's so many great movies you can pick out for that. Let me think of this one. I'll give you a really unique one. Basically, don't look up anything about the story. Do not attempt to find out any details or you will ruin the movie. But if you know the famous indie Danish director, Lars von Trier, one of his early films is a film called The Element of Crime. And it's just about a cop who's investigating a series of murders. I won't say any more than that. You're going to think based on it, like, oh, I've heard a million movies like that. You haven't seen one exactly like the way this one goes. It's got a very unique way of playing the plot. So I'll just leave it that one. There you go. It's fun. There's a fun one you definitely haven't seen that you can all put on your little list.
Yeah. There are a bunch of good ones. Like the thing too is there's a difference between the kind of noir novels that were made in like the 40s and 50s, right, and 30s, compared to the movies, because it was actually illegal at the time to like depict prostitution and drug use in Hollywood. So a lot of the novels are about drug rings, prostitution. Right. But the film versions will change those elements to other forms of like corruption,
like or some shit in it.
Yeah. Like, you know. It was a very weird like law in America that was like censoring movies.
I wouldn't know that. Fair enough. Okay.
So yeah, the books are often like the books of like The Big Sleep is very different than the movie The Big Sleep.
It's a lot seedier in the books there. That's
So what's interesting? What's interesting is in many ways, L.A. Confidential, which is another fabulous like film noir movie
as well.
Yeah, LA Confidential is actually more accurate to old noir books because it has all that shit in it than the actual period film noir movies. So that's a good one. I also love LA Noire, the video game is just fucking great. So good. And also that is more real to the actual stories. But the fact that they like recreated 1940s LA by using maps and like postcards and everything is just incredible in that game. Can you, without saying OGN or Korea, describe your perfect finals opening ceremony? Honestly, hard to beat what they did. It's really hard to beat what was just done with this spring opening ceremony. It's basically everything you want. I think the only way I would have ramped it up more is to start it with like a 30-minute documentary about like the eras of teams in Korea, so that you got like an appreciation of who is a star, like briefly, like an overview of those 10 years. That would have been rad.
What I want is when you have like Worlds or a major and it's like the final or a huge semi-final, I want them to go full WWE. I want like the pyrotechnics, the big fucking Titantron with like the cool intro video, like put out the lights in the arena. There's so many cool things we could do. Because the thing I find whack is this, Monty, is like, I think it's so inappropriate that in the modern day they still do like team introductions. Like, if Simple's on one of the teams, he needs his own introduction, you morons. And he should have a whole thing that's built up that's like thematic to him with quotes and, oh my God, Simple, you know, like all that shit. There should be a whole thing, like UFC even as well. Like you you put all the lights out, you do a whole thing. Like if you do it like that, by the way, the impression on the people in that crowd, that is what will actually make like a live attendance next level. Because people will be like, holy fuck, you don't even get the experience when you're on camera. But even then on camera, it looks mega when you do that. So I think that would be pretty cool. I'll also say, as much as like I don't particularly care about like wasting things just purely for aesthetics, it was quite cool when they had that like fucking augmented reality dragon fly around at Worlds.
Yeah,
that looked pretty good.
We should just have a giant faker that like leans over and looks into the stadium.
One of the fucking Attack on Titan Titans
exactly.
or something. Okay. By the way, why they still haven't thought of that shit, I also don't get. Why don't they do something like when it's each big international tournament, partner with like a Japanese anime studio, take a famous anime and do an intro where all the characters are someone from that, and like it is Faker as a Titan reaching down, but he's reaching down, and then there's Zhao Hu and fucking Caps. Like, these are easy ideas, guys. Fucking write them down. Take a notepad out. That's like a slam dunk. You don't think they'd want to like be associated with esports? There's a million angles you can go with on this shit, couldn't there?
In honor of EG's first LCS championship, who do you think will be the next team to win their first domestic title in each of the major regions? Well, I don't know about that. Let's just pick one. Just pick one.
You know what? Fuck it. It's going to be Rogue in LEC because I don't learn from my mistake. No, it is going to be Rogue in LEC though. It's going to be Rogue in LEC because they haven't won. They're the most obvious one to win, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't think it's likely to happen in Korea, especially with Noguri rejoining Damwon. That seems unlikely to occur. Maybe V5. I mean, that still hasn't happened.
Yeah, that's one. That's one.
So there you go. With Bo joining Surge, it seems likely that he's joining a Western team, Surge Management, I think, which is his agency. Who would you like to sign him, and does it work? I actually am not very familiar with Bo's play, so I don't really feel like I'm qualified to answer that question.
Supposedly, he was like a sort of like a fucking up and coming stud / prodigy.
I know who he is. I just haven't seen him.
So, like, look, obviously, I want it to be a good team. The problem I have is like, because he has that whole like match fixing thing hanging over him. Like, I don't know who it's going to be. The joke is, it should obviously be TSM. They're the only ones who could take the fucking hit of the baggage, right? But who knows if it will be? They'd have to kick Spicker, wouldn't they? So probably not, right?
No, I think they will. I think TSM will sign Maple. I don't think they're going to sign Bo.
Okay. That's a good signing, by the way. I like to see it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thoughts on the major talent announcement? Well,
for CSGO,
weird. Yeah, for CSGO. I mean, for those of you who don't know, there were some pretty notable omissions, such as Sadikist, Anders, Semler, Moses, Yanko, very
Richard.
Yeah, Richard. Like, in spite of the fact that this same TO ran the last major with all of these people. Very, very interesting change of heart. I mean, I know Richard said he wasn't going to do it, and you didn't want to do it either. So,
but it's I'm not exaggerating. The only people, as far as I can tell, who did the playoffs of the last major, who are going to be at this major, is Maniac, Blair, Sponge Machine. That's it. There's no Bardolph, there's no DDK, there's no Semler, there's no Moses, there's no Anders, there's no me, there's no Richard. The difference is as well, by the way, we'll go into all this on bad numbers, don't the way. Difference is, me and Richard turned down the event. Some of the others either weren't hired, and I've heard in Yanko's case, he wasn't even asked. And that is actually like I can't even handle that. Like, basically, Maniac's the number one analyst, and then Yanko's number two. That's it. There's no, you don't need to have any other question. What about this guy? They're the top two, and one of them isn't even going to be there. So I think the whole thing's egregious as fuck. I think it's another example of people having like a mixture of like. I actually do think, by the way, Monty, they're trying to intentionally play to the opposite crowd from the last major because they got such a backlash. Now they're like, look, but we're doing what you're saying, so they want like to win over those people. And then the other angle is, I can't go into it too much because we'll have to see what Richard wants to say, but I think a lot of this is like a reprisal for what happened with the drama with the casters in the playoffs of the last one. Because what it was seen as, Monty, it was seen as like we'd all come together as a group and like we were overruling PGL. Even though we didn't, by the way, it was basically just Richard talked to Moses, found out he was going to get taken off all his games, and was like, well, we can't do that. We've got to get the guy on some games. But PGL saw it as us doing a mutiny, basically. So it doesn't surprise me that magically none of them get hired. And by the way, you might be thinking, but that doesn't make sense, Thorin. Why would they offer you and Richard a gig? Because we have the number one podcast for talking shit on people in the industry. Some people are smart. Not everyone's a Riot Games, you know. Some people figure out, Monty, maybe I should actually try and placate these investigative journalists. The problem is, so it doesn't work if you shit, so we're not going to work the event, so it's over. It's over. So here's the thing. A lot of people that hired were good, but I don't play that shit. Like, I know all my colleagues are different from me in this one. They're going to go, be careful though, don't say anyone else shouldn't be hired because everyone's good. Everyone isn't good, you fucking idiot. It's a competitive field. I'm better than fucking half the people hired here. Moses is way better than some of these casters that have done Blast. I don't care that you like them. These are the best at their job. So here's the thing. Does that guy deserve a gig? Well, what does deserve even mean? If I'm not available, then yeah, he's the next in line. Give him the gig. My problem is this. You want the best to do the event. So in the same way as if you said, I'm going to make a list of the best players in CSGO and you didn't put Simple on there, I wouldn't be dissing whoever I'm saying is not number one by saying Simple should be number one. Simple is number one. The point is, like, the other people can get theirs when they get theirs. There's no, like... It's their time. If you're the best, you're the best. It's not about the time, mate. It's not about marketing. It's not about some like feel-good story. There's another thing. Why would there be like an X factor, feel-good factors who gets hired for a major? It's who's the best at talking about the bloody game. So I find the whole thing like, look, luckily CSGO has a lot of talent, so it'll be a good major anyway. I think they'll probably still do a great job. There will be tech problems, so God bless some of these guys that have only worked with the ESL Blast. You have no idea what you're about to experience. But it'll still be a good tournament. The sad thing for me will just be this. It's what I've always said, Monty. I've always tested this, that it's not just me and Richie. It's not just how we are that causes this response. Because we are just the canary in the coal mine for how fans and industry people treat you. Because here's the problem, right? When they hate on me, Monty, they're always going to say that. They're going to go, well, what do you expect? He's so incendiary with his comments and he's willing to talk about anything and he makes inappropriate jokes. The problem they have is this. Then Stucci will write like a Thorin-esque article, never do a single inappropriate joke, never ever mock anyone, and they'll downvote his shit and say it's all garbage and he knows nothing about the game. So in the same sense, if you're going to go, well, of course you have problems, Thorin, you're always... So what's Moses ever done? You know, Moses
that was what I was going to bring up.
Probably the most amiable people to ever work in esports. So if you have a problem with them, spoiler, you have the problem. It's your problem. It ain't theirs, mate. These are the best people to work with. They're amazing.
Yes,
everyone likes Moses. Everyone.
That's how you know something's weird. Is that Moses not being there is the biggest weird one in all of this, and Anders as well.
So for that shit, that has to be. Just has to be. Come on. It has to be. Come on.
I and they did pick up. Like I'm happy to see Launders and Scrawny. I'm happy to see Maui Snake like doing all these things. Like I'm happy for people, but yeah, like not having Moses there, who is both just so excellent at talking about Counter-Strike and is the nicest person on camera and behind the scenes ever, is very weird.
Yes. It's all good though. It's all good.
If T1 does not win a single international tourney, yet again goes 39-0 or goes 20-0 in LCK, let's put it that way, would you say that this was a successful year for T1?
Listen, I love hypotheticals, but you are way ahead of yourself on that one. You just gave them 20 more series wins. Like, that's without even pointing out Damon's upgraded. I mean, Genji's had a split together now. Like, come on, boys. They're not winning all 20.
And Genji isn't going to have COVID for 2/3 of your matchups that you have in a split, right, guys? So
also, I think the favorite part was he has them winning the 40 series, but then they're not allowed to win MSI or Worlds for reasons. Like, okay, I mean, we can do that. We can get in that headspace. Well,
I mean, the answer is yes, because how can you body your domestic champ? If you are flawless against your domestic competitors, you don't do well internationally. Like, how are you supposed to do better or like find better competition for which to prepare yourself for international tournaments? So yes, I mean, objectively, it's still very successful. Final question: what changed from Samsung CoreJJ to NA CoreJJ? From watching the LCK in years past, I do not recall Core being an all-star or god of Engage that he is today. Oh, so you're saying he's better now. Was he simply overshadowed by names like Ruler and Ambition? Was the meta at the time focused on Enchanter's vision and methodical play? So there are several things. There was significantly less roaming at the time when Core was winning the World Championship. So I think the support play has shifted.
You remember the first year they made the World's Final was the bloody Ardent censored time period, wasn't it? Wasn't it around that? Or was that season 7, actually? Am I getting that mixed up? Wasn't that season 6? It was one of those years. Yeah. Anyway, that was the era where obviously the bot lanes were having a great time, weren't they? But it was like on autopilot, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I think that the position of support has changed quite a bit, and he has adapted very well to that. Also, obviously, level of competition, enormous difference. Level of support play in NA is generally not great. Like, it's hard to find good supports in NA. If you ask any team, it's very difficult to find good support players overall. We've seen mid laners who have won titles, like who he switched to support, because that is a position of need, especially for NA native players, because you don't want to use necessarily an import slot on support, but you kind of have to because all the NA supports are bad, except for Vulcan. I think it's a difference of meta and evolution of the support role over the years more than anything else, combined with easier time playing. But I mean, he's still an amazing. I think CoreJJ could easily go back to Korea and still be on a top roster.
And also, if you just think about the way you set up the question, look, if I was playing with Ruler, I would just be a real support player, just do whatever Ruler needs to get through the lane and get to the fucking team fight. That's how you win the game when you play with Ruler. Like, you're not going to be trying god tier roams in that scenario. Like, you've got probably the best AD carry ever to come from Korea, maybe. Like, so at that point in time, you're just going to get him to his items, aren't you? Makes sense. And as Monty says, this is before Season 8, basically. So this is before we opened the meta up with all these crazy top and mid flexes and all those million champions with dashes. like the era that you're talking about was also like a different version of League for me. That was the era with all the fucking tracker's knife and the old meta and the slow developing gameplay that goes from a long early game to a long mid game to a late game. Like, it's like that comment I made a couple of years ago. We even had to change what the bloody concept of late game became. Like, late game now is just the old mid game. That's the joke.
Like 25 minutes.
You know, it doesn't feel like there are any true late game. Late game used to be like 45 minutes or whatever back then, like the enormous games. Yeah. So, and also, unfortunately, in how you phrased that question, you gave yourself away, pleb. You gave the tell at the end. Because that last part you put in, it was all great when you were like, is it because of names like Ruler or Ambition? What the Ambition? You just said Ambition's name. You are aware Ambition winning that Worlds is one of the most fucking overhyped narratives. Like, the idea he was the MVP of Worlds. Are you out of your fucking mind? He was only playing, this is not a joke, because Haru, that's right, the guy who's in fucking EU Masters now, could only play like one style of jungle, like super fucking mechanical style, like that was it. So like, essentially, Ambition was like filling holes. He wasn't like some star jungler for fuck's sake. Like, that was actually amazing. He won Worlds that way. So like, I think in that team, realistically, that was the crown and ruler show, that team, with a bit of QV.
You'll have a good laugh at this, Thorin, because I didn't read the last sentence of the question, which is, am I too much of a pleb to understand he was an amazing talent the entire time? So
there you go. Maybe in the end, the pleb was the friends we made along the way. Exactly. Yes.
All right, guys, as far as the next show of SI, I'll be real with you. I don't really feel like doing an MSI preview for these dog shit groups that are going to happen, because I'm not going to go watch a bunch of Latin American games. I'm just not going to do it. So my ability to preview this properly is just going to come down to
parties for the big games, though. If there's like a big marquee matchup.
Look, NA versus EU watch parties and groups are going to be fun. Yes. We will do some watch parties. Yes. I'm just saying, I probably don't want to do an SI before MSI begins.
Yes. And don't worry, it'll all be good.
I do want to do an SI after the first rounds of groups, previewing the Rumble stage, which will feature better games, and I will have watched some of the minor region teams that are going to be going into the actual Rumble stage, so I will have a take on them. But I really, that preview show will be worthless and boring, so I don't really see a need to do it. But we will do an SI before the actual Rumble stage, and then before the playoffs. So we'll do a couple. But yeah, that's it. So we'll see you guys whenever that happens. A couple weeks. We're gonna take a break. Go watch CS:GO. Goodbye.
Subscribe to the channel.